Chapter 2791. A desperate gamble with his life? Kuyo Oneguchi's voice fell, making Eternally Merciless frown, his expression a lot gloomy. Yes, gamble with his life. Kuyo Oneguchi nodded heavily, his gaze sinisterly looking at Nie Tian, saying, "A son must pay his father's debts. If you want to take Nie Fenghua away, Nie Tian must win this bet." Eternally Merciless gaze focused, then he couldn't help but sneer, saying, "Kuyo Oneguchi, if I want to leave now, you simply can't stop me. Why should I gamble with you?" The present situation was completely under Eternally Merciless control. As long as he wanted to leave, Kuyo Oneguchi simply couldn't stop him. Humph! Suddenly, Kuyo Oneguchi sneered, saying, "Eternally Merciless, if you want to leave, this dean indeed can't stop you, but if you want to take this father and son away, it won't be an easy matter either. You don't really think that my Saint Soul Academy is a place where people can casually enter and leave, do you? I can tell you, the Saint Soul mountain range is enveloped by a huge ancient killing formation. As long as I activate it, the entire Saint Soul mountain range will be destroyed in an instant. Even if you're eternally merciless, don't even think of breaking the ancient killing formation." Finished speaking, Kuyo Oneguchi's expression became even more gloomy and vicious. Eternally Merciless couldn't help but have a gloomy expression after listening to Kuyo Oneguchi, saying in a cold voice, "In order to keep me here, you'll destroy the entire Saint Soul mountain range? So what?" Kuyo Oneguchi smiled coldly, saying in a cold voice, "Since you want to take away the traitor of Saint Soul Academy, that's provoking Saint Soul Academy. As the dean, how can I just watch as you take him away? Even if everyone here has to die with you, you won't hesitate?" Eternal Merciless said in a deep voice, his expression cold. "Yes." Kuyo Oneguchi nodded heavily, with a resolute expression, he loudly said, "For the dignity of Saint Soul Academy, all of us Saint Soul Academy can be sacrificed at any time." As Ling Rant's voice rang out, the faces of the people below turned pale. Kuyo Oneguchi did not hesitate to destroy the Holy Soul mountain range in order to keep Merciless eternally merciless. This was something that no one had expected. Moreover, Kuyo Oneguchi's posture didn't seem to be fake. Eternally Merciless' expression immediately became gloomy, not knowing what to do for a moment. "Kuyo Oneguchi, what do you want to bet? I'll bet with you." At this time, Nie Tian took a step forward, speaking coldly, eyes as firm as killing intent. Eternally Merciless stared blankly for a moment, his expression even more gloomy. To think that he, a grand legend of the sword world, at this moment actually wanted Nie Tian to step forward. "Fine." Kuyo Oneguchi's gaze blazed as he looked at Nie Tian. He was waiting for Nie Tian to take the initiative to step forward. He sneered, saying, "Nie Tian, this dean will give you a chance. As long as you win, Nie Fenghua can live. If you lose, Nie Fenghua must die. Don't talk nonsense, speak directly. What do you want me to do?" Nie Tianling said coldly, eyes fierce and firm. "For the following bet, no matter what, he must win. You have guts." Kuyo Oneguchi sneered, then waved his hand. A strange flame appeared, burning in the void, instantly condensing into a huge furnace. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed when he saw the huge furnace. He could feel the unusually strong Saint Spirit Qi. "Nie Tian, the furnace you see is called the Saint Soul Furnace. It is filled with the Saint Spirit Flame." Kuyo Oneguchi smiled coldly and said, "Our bet is very simple. As long as you enter the Saint Soul Furnace and stay inside for more than an hour, you win. Otherwise, you lose." Nie Tian frowned, and his expression became very unsightly. Kuyo Oneguchi was too cunning. The Saint Spirit Flame burning inside the Saint Soul Furnace had a strong burning effect on the martial body of a cultivator. What was more troublesome was that Nie Tian felt that the Saint Spirit Flame had a great stimulating effect on the Saint Soul Curse Seal in his body. At this moment, standing outside the Saint Soul Furnace, he could already feel the Saint Soul Curse Seal in his body becoming active, as if it would soon go berserk. If he entered the Saint's soul furnace, even if he could resist the burning of the Saint's spirit flame, he would not be able to resist the Saint's soul curse seal in his body. Kuyo Anaguchi proposed such a bet. It was obvious that he wanted to kill Nye Tian. Nye Tian, do you agree to this bet? Kuyo Anaguchi saw that Nye Tian did not speak, so he smiled coldly, his face full of provocation. Nye Tian, don't agree. Before Nye Tian could speak, Fat Cat's voice came from his divine sense, shouting nervously, "The Saint's soul curse seal will go out of control, you will die." The last time the Saint's soul curse seal went out of control, Nye Tian almost died. Fortunately, Si Xiaoye was there and used the heavenly Dao scar to stabilize him. This time, if he entered the Saint's soul furnace, Nye Tian would definitely go out of control again. Nye Tian, this furnace is very strange, you must not enter. At this moment, the Ghost Emperor's voice also sounded, saying in a deep voice. Nye Tian's eyes were gloomy, and he did not say a word. Kuyo Anaguchi, you are the dignified dean of the Saint Soul sect, do you not feel ashamed at all to make things difficult for a junior? At this time, Eternally Merciless could not help but say coldly, I will take Nye Fenghua away now, I want to see if you have the courage to fight to the death. With that, Eternally Merciless' figure moved, and he actually wanted to leave. I agree. But at this time, Nye Tian suddenly opened his mouth, looking coldly at Kuyo Anaguchi, and said loudly. Kuyo Anaguchi was stunned at first, then his eyes trembled, and he was pleasantly surprised and passionate. He knew that Nye Tian would definitely agree. At this time, Nye Tian had no choice but to risk his life. He would definitely persist in the Saint's soul furnace for an hour, even if he died inside. He could only win this bet, he could not lose. Nye Tian, please. Kuyo Anaguchi smiled coldly, indicating that Nye Tian could start. Nye Tian's eyes trembled slightly, and he turned to look at the unconscious Nye Fenghua. Then without hesitation, he jumped into the Saint's soul furnace. Eternally Merciless frowned, and his expression was very ugly. Looking at Kuyo Anaguchi, his face was sinister, and his heart coldly said, Nye Tian, the moment you stepped into the Saint's soul furnace, it was already destined that only one of you can live. The Saint's soul flame will incessantly stimulate the Saint's soul incantation, and with your martial body, you can't even withstand the second-rank Saint Soul incantation. Thinking of this, Kuyo Anaguchi's eyes shone with a sinister and vicious light. He calculated the time, and within an hour, the power of the Saint Soul flame was enough to stimulate the Saint Soul incantation to the third rank. And Nye Tian's martial body couldn't even withstand the second-rank Saint Soul incantation. If Nye Tian wanted to save Nye Fenghua, then he would have to use his life to save her. At the same time, in the Saint's soul furnace, as soon as Nye Tian entered, he felt waves of blazing Saint soul flame, burning fiercely, and began to incinerate his body. And in his body, stimulated by the Saint's soul flame, the Saint's soul incantation runes began to go berserk, wreaking havoc in a frenzy. In an instant, Nye Tian felt as if the meridians in his body were being bitten by thousands of ants and insects, and a pain that penetrated deep into his bones assaulted his entire body. Chapter 2792. A blessing in disguise. Within the Saint's spirit furnace, Nye Tian was enveloped by the violent and blazing Saint spirit flames. Even if he activated his astral soul shield to defend himself, he was still unable to block the Saint Spirit Flame's aura from entering his body. As the Saint Spirit Flame continued to enter his body, the Saint Spirit curse mark hidden in his martial body started to go berserk. Countless runes wreaked havoc as if they were trying to tear Nye Tian's body apart. Nye Tian endured the intense pain. He felt as if his body was being bitten by thousands of ants and insects, and outside his body, there were countless sharp blades cutting and tearing. The piercing pain caused his entire face to contort, making him look ferocious and terrifying. Nye Tian. At this moment, the fat cat's panicked voice rang out. he could feel that all of Nye Tian's meridians, blood, and bones were under tremendous pressure. The power of the Holy Soul Curse Seal was too terrifying. Right now, Nye Tian's martial body could only withstand the power of the first level of the Holy Soul Curse Seal. But at this moment, the Holy Soul Seal was becoming more and more violent under the stimulation of the Holy Soul Flames. In an hour's time, the Saint Soul Curse was enough to reach the third or even the fourth rank. This was something that Nye Tian's martial body could not withstand. At that time, Nye Tian's martial body would be forcefully torn apart by the Sacred Soul Curse Seal. At this moment, Nye Tian's whole body was drenched in cold sweat, and even his divine sense was slowly collapsing. How could he have the time to pay attention to the fat cat? Fat cat, if this goes on, this kid won't be able to hold on. At this moment, the Ghost Emperor's voice sounded. I know. Fat cat growled. He was very clear about the state of Nye Tian's martial body. However, he had no choice but to watch helplessly. Ah! At this moment, Nye Tian couldn't hold it in any longer and let out a beast-like howl. Outside the Sacred Soul Furnace, everyone could clearly hear Nye Tian's blood-curdling screams. It was as if they could feel how much pain Nye Tian was enduring just by listening to his screams. Eternally Merciless narrowed his eyes and his face darkened. He thought to himself, Brat, you have to hold on. He was confused, because he felt that the aura of the Saint's spirit flame was not strong. It should be difficult for it to destroy a peak immortal state martial artist. Although he did not know much about Nye Tian, he could feel that Nye Tian's martial body was far stronger than other warriors of the same level. He should be able to withstand the Saint's spirit flame. But why were Nye Tian's cries so tragic at this moment? Could it be that there's also a Holy Soul Curse Seal in that boy's body? In the next moment, Eternally Merciless suddenly thought of something. He looked at Kuyo Anaguchi, and he couldn't help but cry out in his heart when he saw the latter's extremely strange smile. Eternally Merciless was no stranger to the Holy Soul Curse, because Nye Fenghua's Holy Soul Curse was suppressed by him using the emotionless sword intent. Otherwise, Nye Fenghua would not have survived until now and would have been tortured to death by the Holy Soul Curse Seal. He sensed the Saint's spirit flame and realized that the aura of the flame was extremely similar to the Holy Soul Curse Seal. If Nye Tian also had the Holy Soul Curse Seal in his body, it would be terrible. At this moment, Kuyo Anaguchi smiled coldly and looked at Eternally Merciless with disdain. Eternally Merciless, you will definitely lose this round. Despicable. Eternally Merciless' eyes trembled as he growled. He was now sure that Nye Tian definitely had the Holy Soul Curse Seal in his body. If he had known this earlier, he would never have let Nye Tian enter the Holy Soul Furnace. But now that Nye Tian was already in the Holy Soul Furnace, it was too late to say anything. He never thought that Kuyo Anaguchi would be so shameless. The crowd below also heard Nye Tian's screams. Their eyes trembled as they started discussing. Listening to this kid's screams, he can't hold on any longer. He won't die in the furnace, right? So what if he can't hold on? Could it be that he can still jump out of the furnace? If he comes out now, his traitor father will die. Sigh. Speaking of which, this kid is really pitiful. If he holds on, he will definitely die in the Holy Soul Furnace. If he doesn't, his father will die. Between his life and his father's life, there can only be one. Ardeen is really ruthless. In my opinion, this kid deserves it. Who asked him to have a traitor father? As they spoke, their gazes shifted to the Holy Soul Furnace. Their eyes shone with a fervent light. It was as if they were watching a good show. And at this moment, the person with the ugliest expression was Huairu. He stared at the Holy Soul Furnace, his old face stiff and lifeless, clearly thinking about something in his heart. If he had known that Nye Fenghua would appear in this way, he would definitely not have allowed Nye Tian to come to the Holy Soul Academy. Is the future Star Sky Holy Lord going to die like this? Hua-Iru's eyes trembled slightly as he thought to himself. He was extremely looking forward to a miracle. At the same time, in the Holy Soul Furnace, Nie Tian's body was burning with the Holy Soul Flame, and the Holy Soul Seal in his body became even more violent. The pain he was suffering at this moment was absolutely unimaginable to ordinary people. If it had been someone with a weak mind, his divine sense would have already collapsed before his martial body was torn apart. Nie Tian, hang in there, I will be done soon. At this moment, Liolio's voice was suddenly heard. It was difficult to hide the nervousness in his voice, but at the same time, there was a trace of excitement. Nie Tian's divine sense was still awake at this moment. Although he did not know what Lulu was talking about, he nodded his head heavily. Then, a white halo began to emit from Nie Tian's forehead, instantly enveloping his entire body. Then, a strange scene happened. The violent Holy Soul Flame hit Nie Tian's body and was actually absorbed by the white halo outside his body. At this moment, Nie Tian could no longer feel the aura of the Holy Soul Flame. The faint layer of white halo had completely blocked the Holy Soul Flame. Nie Tian took a deep breath and his ferocious face eased a lot. The cold sweat on his face slowly receded. After a while, the Holy Soul Seal in his body slowly stabilized and returned to its dormant state. Lulu, are you absorbing the power of the Holy Soul Flame? At this moment, Nie Tian became cold and asked with a slight frown. He did not expect Lulu to be able to absorb even the Holy Soul Flame. Of course. Lulu laughed excitedly and said, the Holy Soul Flame is good stuff. I am currently weak, and this Holy Soul Flame is just right for me to recover to a full state. Actually, when Nie Tian had just entered the Holy Soul Furnace, Lulu had already started to prepare everything. He just did not say it out loud. Earlier, he had used all of his power to help Nie Tian make his breakthrough. Now, he could absorb the power of the Holy Soul Flame to recover himself. Nie Tian was taken aback and his mind went blank. It seemed that entering the Holy Soul Furnace was a blessing in disguise. Of course, he knew that the power that Lulu absorbed would still be given to him in the end. The Holy Soul Flame is good stuff, but what really excites me is this Holy Soul Furnace. At this moment, Liolio's voice was heard again, and it was filled with greed. Holy Soul Furnace? Nie Tian was stunned and he could not help but frown. Chapter 2793. Complete Absorption. Nie Tian, who was in the Saint Soul Furnace, was speechless after hearing Liolio's words. He had not expected that Lulu would absorb the Sacred Soul Furnace as well. Judging from the expression on Kuyo Oniguchi's face when he took out the Sacred Soul Furnace, it seemed to be very important to him. He wondered what expression Kuyo Oniguchi would have if Lulu really absorbed the Sacred Soul Furnace. It would definitely be a beautiful scene. Lulu, do you need me to do anything now? Nie Tian asked with a faint smile after calming down. Nothing. You just need to sit here quietly. Lulu replied with a smile. His tone was filled with excitement and pride. At the same time, outside the Sacred Soul Furnace, Cursed Gigu couldn't help but feel strange when he saw the Sacred Soul Furnace become quiet. His eyes narrowed. However, the Sacred Soul Furnace isolated all senses from the outside world, so even he couldn't sense what was happening inside. Kuyo Oniguchi was confused by Nie Tian's sudden silence. That kid can't be dead, right? On the other side, Eternally Merciless' expression was even more awkward. He was worried that Nie Tian had died inside the Sacred Soul Furnace. The crowd below trembled as they discussed among themselves. There's no movement from that kid. He should be dead. He was screaming so miserably just now. Now that he's not screaming, he must be dead. What do you guys think? If that kid died inside the Sacred Soul Furnace, did he survive for an hour? Probably. After all, he stayed in the Sacred Soul Furnace for an hour. Ha ha. Everyone discussed with a gloating look on their faces. Kuyo Oniguchi, hurry up and put away the Saint Soul Furnace. I want to see Nye Tian's current situation. Eternally Merciless couldn't help but take a step forward and say in a deep voice. Eternally Merciless, this Dean and Nye Tian agreed on an hour's time. Now that the time isn't up, this Dean naturally can't collect the smelting furnace. Kuyo Oniguchi smiled faintly and replied coldly. You. Eternally Merciless' face was gloomy, and he was momentarily speechless. He thought that if he removed the sacred soul furnace now, perhaps Nye Tian would still be alive and could be saved. The more time passed, the more danger Nye Tian was in. If Nye Tian really died, then even if Nye Fenghua survived, she would inevitably carry a lifetime of guilt. For a father, his own son had died to save him. This would be a lifelong burden. At the moment, Nye Fenghua was unconscious. Eternally Merciless had to make a choice for him. If between Nye Tian and Nye Fenghua, only one person could survive, it had to be Nye Tian. However, Kuyo Oniguchi wasn't willing to remove the sacred soul furnace. He clearly wanted to kill Nye Tian. Senior Wuqing, I'm fine. However, at this moment, Nye Tian's voice suddenly rang out from the sacred soul furnace. His voice wasn't loud, but it was like a clap of thunder. Everyone was stunned as they stared at the sacred soul furnace in shock. Nye Tian was in the sacred soul furnace, so the outside world couldn't sense his situation. However, he could see what was happening outside. In order not to worry Eternally Merciless, he had said it casually. However, everyone was stunned by his voice. They were completely stunned. Judging from Nye Tian's voice, he seemed to be completely fine. He was very calm and indifferent. It could even be said that he was very satisfied. How is this possible? After a few seconds, Kuyo Oniguchi reacted and let out a strange cry. His face was as ugly as it could be. He had never imagined that Nye Tian was actually still alive. Furthermore, he was very normal, as if nothing had happened to him. Eternally Merciless was also stunned and couldn't react for a long time. He even suspected that Nye Tian's miserable cries just now were all an act. The expressions of the crowd below were even more shocked. Their jaws dropped to the ground, and it took a long time for them to make a sound. Did I hear wrongly? Why is that kid's voice so calm? It seems like nothing has happened to him. He was screaming so miserably just now. Why is he suddenly fine? He can't be pretending, right? That sacred soul furnace is too strange. The outside world can't sense what's inside and can only hear sounds. Could that kid be playing with us? The crowd couldn't figure out the situation inside the sacred soul furnace, so they could only make wild guesses. Most of them didn't want Nye Tian to win the bet, because if he did, there wouldn't be a good show to watch. Meanwhile, inside the sacred soul furnace, Lulu was crazily absorbing the sacred soul flames. The white halo around Nye Tian's body was getting brighter. After a while, the aura of the sacred soul flames inside the furnace started to weaken. At this time, Lulu started to absorb the energy of the sacred soul furnace. Outside the sacred soul furnace, Kuyo Oniguchi felt that something was amiss. His expression sank as he took a step forward and tried to recall the sacred soul furnace. However, he could feel that the sacred soul furnace was being restrained by a force, and he couldn't recall it. Damn it! The sudden change caused Kuyo Oniguchi's eyes to tremble. He roared, "Nye Tian, what are you trying to do?" "Kuyo Oniguchi, you'll know what I'm trying to do soon." Nye Tian's voice was heard, replying in a mocking tone. Bastard! Kuyo Oniguchi had a premonition that something bad was about to happen. His expression was extremely gloomy, and he didn't know what to do. Eternally Merciless was just beside him, so he didn't dare to destroy the sacred soul furnace. This kid called Nye Tian has some tricks up his sleeve. Eternally Merciless smiled and murmured. Then, under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the sacred soul furnace became smaller and smaller, gradually disappearing. How is this possible? He's actually absorbing the energy of the sacred soul furnace. Kuyo Oniguchi finally understood. His eyes trembled violently, and he couldn't believe what was happening in front of him. Not even in his wildest dreams did he imagine that Nye could absorb the sacred soul furnace. What was on Nye body? Kuyo Oniguchi didn't know what was happening in front of him at all. The shock in his heart was indescribable. The worst thing was that he couldn't stop Nye at all. He could only watch as Nye absorbed the sacred soul furnace. As for the crowd below, they were all petrified, like rows of wooden sculptures. After a while, the sacred soul furnace disappeared completely in front of everyone's eyes. Nye figure appeared, covered in a layer of white light. In an instant, it flickered and disappeared between his brows. This! Everyone looked at Nye figure, and the shock in their hearts was perfectly written on their faces. They all gasped and froze on the spot. The scene in front of them was too strange. Nye had actually absorbed the sacred soul furnace. At this moment, Nye looked at Kuyo Oniguchi, and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. He said calmly, "Kuyo Oniguchi, you've lost." Chapter 2794. Chapter 2789. Chapter 2, 789. I will pay you back. Kuyo Oniguchi's expression was one of shock and fear. He had never expected that Nye would have a Saint Spirit blood seal in his body. The Saint Spirit blood seal was very well hidden. Kuyo Oniguchi only confirmed that it was the Saint Spirit blood seal at the last moment when he saw the white halo around Nye body. Why can't I have the Saint Spirit blood seal in my body? Nye smiled faintly. Since Kuyo Oniguchi had seen through the Saint Spirit blood seal, there was no need for him to hide it. You! Kuyo Oniguchi looked at Nye and felt suffocated. There was a lump of air in his throat that he could neither swallow nor spit out. It was extremely uncomfortable. He had never expected that Nye would have the Saint Spirit blood seal in his body. If he had known about the existence of the Saint Spirit blood seal, he would never have allowed Nye to enter the Saint Soul furnace. He had paid a huge price to refine the Saint Soul furnace. Now, the furnace had been absorbed by Nye just like that. How could he not be angry? I won the bet. Nye Tianling looked coldly at Kuyo Oniguchi and said faintly. Kuyo Oniguchi's eyes trembled viciously. He could not say a word at this moment. Below, the crowd was in an uproar. That kid absorbed the Saint Soul furnace. He really won. Not only did the dean lose, he even lost the Saint Soul furnace for nothing. This is unbelievable. Is this silver-haired kid more talented than his traitor father? I wonder if the dean will let them go? Voices expressed the shock and astonishment in their hearts. At this moment, Nye expression was very calm. He did not say much, but turned to look at Eternally Merciless and said, "Senior Merciless, let's go." Yes. The stiffness on Eternally Merciless' face eased a little. He looked at Nye with a hint of passion in his eyes. He nodded and prepared to leave. Wait. At this moment, Kuyo Oniguchi's voice sounded. Eternally Merciless frowned and stared coldly at Kuyo Oniguchi. Kuyo Oniguchi, Nye has already won. Are you going back on your word? Nye had won the bet. If Kuyo Oniguchi went back on his word, it would be too shameless. In any case, he was still the dean of Holy Soul Academy. Returning in front of countless teachers and students of Holy Soul Academy was really shameless. This dean admits that Nye has indeed won, Kuyo Oniguchi said coldly. His eyes were cold as he said, "This dean can let you take Nye Fenghua away. But Nye cannot leave. He is still a student of the academy. Without this dean's permission, he cannot leave the academy. Kuyo Oniguchi, you are too despicable to do this." Eternally Merciless' eyes trembled. He did not expect Kuyo Oniguchi to be so shameless. Even he could not help but have killing intent at this moment. Whether it is despicable or not, it is this dean's business. Kuyo Oniguchi smiled coldly. Moreover, what this dean said is the truth. You. Eternally Merciless' eyes darkened. His whole body suddenly surged with endless sword intent. Suddenly, heaven and earth became incomparably austere. With his strength, killing Kuyo Oniguchi was as easy as turning his hand. Senior Wuching. But at this time, Nie Tian took a step forward and said, Kuyo Oniguchi is right. I am still a student of Saint Soul Academy. If I leave the academy now, wouldn't I be like my father, carrying the name of a traitor of the academy? This. Eternally Merciless was stunned. He was speechless for a moment. Although Nie Tian's words sounded a little strange, if one thought about it carefully, it was indeed so. Humph. Kuyo Oniguchi laughed coldly. His sinister eyes stared at Nie Tian. Nie Tian, if you leave now, this dean will carve your name on the Saint Soul Sin tablet. You will be like your father, a sinner of Saint Soul Academy. Dean, there is no need to go through so much trouble. I will not leave the academy. Nie Tianling laughed coldly. My father wants to erase his name from the Saint Soul Sin tablet. If he can't do it as a son, I will do it for him. Don't worry. Before my father's name is erased from the Saint Soul Sin tablet, I will definitely not leave the academy. When Kuyo Oniguchi heard Nie Tian's words, his eyes trembled. The corners of his mouth curled into a sinister smile. He laughed coldly in his heart. Nie Tian, you really are Nie Fenghua's son. Just like your father, you value your reputation. You father and son are burdened by your reputation. This will become your greatest weakness. Nie Tian smiled faintly. His expression was calm and indifferent. His decision to stay at Saint Soul Academy was not because he was afraid of being a traitor. It was because he wanted to complete Nie Fenghua's unfinished business. Furthermore, he had other plans in his heart. Since Kuyo Oniguchi had planted the Saint Soul curse mark in his body, it meant that he was useful to the former. Therefore, the former would not easily kill him. After considering all aspects, Nie Tian made his decision to continue staying at Saint Soul Academy. Nie Tian, have you decided? Eternally Merciless saw the determination in Nie Tian's eyes. He couldn't help but frown and ask. I've decided. Nie Tian nodded his head. His figure moved and solemnly came to Eternally Merciless' side. He bowed deeply and said, Senior Wuching, I'll have to trouble you to take care of my father. Eternally Merciless frowned. He couldn't help but look at the unconscious Nie Fenghua. He smiled bitterly and said, Nie Fenghua owes me a lot. I helped him, but it seems that he won't have the chance to help me. When Nie Tian heard Eternally Merciless' words, he couldn't help but frown. He could see that there seemed to be some agreement between Eternally Merciless and Nie Fenghua. This was why Eternally Merciless wanted to save Nie Fenghua. But unfortunately, Nie Fenghua was defeated by Kuyo Oniguchi. Therefore, it would be very difficult for him to repay Eternally Merciless' favor. Senior Wuching, no matter what my father owes you, I'll repay it for him. Nie Tian said gravely after thinking for a while. Eternally Merciless looked at Nie Tian. Feeling the latter's determination, he smiled faintly and sighed, saying, Nie Tian, you really are a genius. But it's a pity that your strength is too weak. What I want to do, even your father will have to pay a huge price to complete it. The current you can't help me at all. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, and then he said solemnly again, Senior Wuching, what my father owes you, I'll repay it. Eternally Merciless looked at Nie Tian. His expression changed slightly, and his heart actually trembled inexplicably. At this moment, Nie Tian reminded him of a person, himself in the past. The unswerving determination in Nie Tian's eyes moved him. He believed that there was nothing that a person with such eyes could not do. Good. Immediately, Eternally Merciless laughed brightly and said, I'll remember your words and wait for you to grow up. Thank you, Senior. Nie Tian nodded slightly, his face calm. Eternally Merciless was very strong. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he was the strongest person he had ever seen. But he was confident that one day, he would definitely surpass Eternally Merciless. Chapter 2795. The son of a traitor, Nyetian, I'm leaving. Eternally Merciless looked at Nyetian and prepared to leave. Nyetian nodded slightly, his eyes fixed on the unconscious Nyefenghua. Father and son only met for a very short period of time. To be exact, it was only the time of a glance. And now, father and son were about to separate. Nyetian had too much reluctance in his heart. But he had no choice but to do so. At the end of the day, his strength was still too weak, and he was restrained at every turn. If he was an expert that stood at the peak of the myriad domains, how would Kuyo Oniguchi dare to find trouble with him? Father, believe me, I will definitely grow up very quickly. Nyetian looked at Nyefenghua, his eyes trembling slightly as he said heavily in his heart. Nyetian, don't worry, I will take care of your father. Eternally Merciless smiled faintly. I will remember what you said just now, and I will take it seriously. I hope you won't let me down. And thank you for your trust, Elder. Nyetian nodded heavily, and once again bowed to Eternally Merciless to thank him. With Eternally Merciless strength and identity, he could completely treat Nyetian's words as a joke. But he took it seriously. This meant that he regarded Nyetian as a friend, and treated him seriously. Eternal Wuching nodded slightly and didn't say anything further. His figure flashed, and he strode through the sky at an extremely swift speed. He transformed into a sword mark that flashed towards an expanse of space, and he vanished completely in an instant. Nyetian looked at the sword mark in the void, his expression somewhat solemn. After a long time, it slightly improved. After a moment, he calmed down, and a pair of deep eyes looked at Kuyo Oniguchi. The corner of Kuyo Oniguchi's mouth trembled. With a smile that wasn't a smile he said, Nyetian, you can stay at Holy Spirit Academy, this dean is very happy. I hope you won't be like your father, a traitor to Holy Spirit Academy. Dean, you don't have to provoke me. Nyetianling laughed and replied, I won't leave the academy before I help my father fulfill his wish. That's good. Kuyo Oniguchi laughed coldly. He didn't stay any longer as his silhouette flickered and he left. He had first been injured by Nyefenghua, and then he had been struck by Eternally Merciless sword. His injuries were not light, and if he wanted to completely recover, he would need some time. More importantly, his sacred soul furnace had been absorbed by Nyetian. This was what hurt him the most. Kuyo Oniguchi. Nyetian looked in the direction in which Kuyo Oniguchi left, the corner of his mouth twitched coldly, and he said in his heart, You owe my father, I will definitely help him get it back. After a moment, he didn't stay any longer, and his silhouette flickered in a flash, heading in the direction of Icefire Valley. The crowd below took a long time to disperse. Today's big play was really too unforgettable. Nyefenghua's breathtaking performance was shocking. If he hadn't fought with the 3 elders of the Holy Spirit Academy before, but had had a fair fight with Kuyo Oniguchi, who knew what the result would have been. Eternally Merciless' appearance was even more shocking. The legend of the sword world that defeated all the swords in the world with one sword was really shocking. But the most surprising thing was still Nyetian's sudden appearance. After today, everyone in Holy Spirit Academy would know that Nyetian was the son of the traitor Nyefenghua. Nyetian's silhouette descended, and appeared outside Icefire Valley. Nyetian, are you all right? Huairu stepped forward and asked nervously. I'm fine. Nyetian smiled faintly, and his aura didn't weaken at all, but instead became a little stronger. At this moment, the brothers Jushan and Jushan looked at Nyetian with a somewhat unnatural expression, as if they wanted to say something, but didn't dare to. Jushan. Nyetian looked at the brothers Jushan and knew what they were thinking and said directly, I'm Nie Fenghua's son. If you don't want to accept a traitor's son as your boss, you can go back on your words at any time, I don't blame you. Boss, we. Jushan and Jushan were stunned, and didn't know what to say for a moment. They were indeed very shocked and conflicted when they learned that Nie Tian was Nie Fenghua's son. Everyone in Holy Spirit Academy knew that Nie Fenghua was the biggest traitor of the academy. Therefore, there was no doubt that Nie Tian would become the target of the academy. Under such circumstances, if they continued to be Nie Tian's lackeys, they would also attract endless trouble. You can leave, Nie Tian said coldly, seeing that the two were hesitating. We. Jushan and Jushan looked at each other awkwardly. Do we need to look at the other party's background when making friends? At this moment, Huairu said in a deep voice, if that's the case, are you making friends with this person, or his background? Jushan and Jushan's expressions changed, and they were even more embarrassed. Jushan and Jushan, I won't blame you if you leave now, but from now on, we are no longer friends, but passers-by, Nie Tian said in a deep voice. Just as Nie Tian's words left his mouth, a deep, furious bellow echoed out. Bastard! Then, a figure landed, and it was none other than Situ Bai. Grand Master! Jushan and Jushan were stunned when they saw Situ Bai, but they immediately reacted and exclaimed in shock. Jushan and Jushan, what are you thinking? Situ Bai's face darkened and he scolded, just because Nie Tian's father is Nie Fenghua, you are going to disown him? What's the difference between your actions and being ungrateful? Jushan and Jushan's faces darkened, and they knelt down in fear. They did not know why Situ Bai was so angry. Senior Situ, I won't blame them no matter what choice they make. Nie Tian looked at Situ Bai and said calmly. Jushan and Jushan immediately reacted, and they looked at Nie Tian and said in unison, Boss Nie Tian, we were wrong. No matter what happens in the future, you will always be our boss. Nie Tian's eyes flickered, and he stepped forward to help the Shanha and Jushan brothers up. He looked at them without saying a word. Jushan and Jushan, you guys leave first. After a while, Situ Bai let the Shanha and Jushan brothers leave first, and the two left after informing Nie Tian. Only Situ Bai, Huairu, and Nie Tian were left outside the Icefire Valley. Nie Tian, I did not expect you to be Nie Fenghua's son. Situ Bai spoke in a deep voice, and he looked at Nie Tian with a complicated gaze, as if he was feeling guilty. At this moment, Huairu told him about the battle between Nie Fenghua and the three elders of the Holy Soul sect. Nie Tian stepped forward, bowed slightly, and said, Senior Situ, it was my father who acted rashly. I apologize on his behalf. Nie Tian, you don't have to apologize. It's our fault. Situ Bai smiled bitterly and said, I did not expect Kuyo Oniguchi to be so despicable as to use us three elders. The Holy Soul Sin Tablet is of utmost importance to the Holy Soul Academy. We have to protect it. Sigh. At this point Situ Bai could not help but sigh and said, if Nie Fenghua had not fought with us three elders, I don't know if he could have killed Kuyo Oniguchi with his strength. Perhaps. Huairu smiled bitterly and sighed. He then looked at Nie Tian with a playful smile on his face. In fact, he was very satisfied with the current situation. Nie Fenghua did not die, and Nie Tian did not leave the Holy Soul Academy. Moreover, what Nie Tian had just experienced was very important to him. From today onwards, Nie Tian had a greater goal in his heart, so he was more motivated to improve his strength. Chapter 2796. Mission of the Academy, Senior Situ, I want to know what happened to my father back then. Outside the Icefire Valley, Nie Tian frowned and asked Situ Bai. I don't know either. Situ Bai shook his head and said, only Kuyo Oniguchi and your father know what happened back then. Kuyo Oniguchi was the one who made your father a traitor of the academy. I've never dealt with your father before, but I can feel from our battle just now that he's definitely not the scum that Kuyo Oniguchi said. There must be something hidden about what happened back then. Nyetian didn't say anything for a long while. Brother Situ, I think you're badly injured. I'm afraid you'll need to recuperate for a while. At this time, Huairu looked at Situ Bai and said in a deep voice, Yes. Situ Bai nodded and said with a bitter smile, Nie Fenghua is indeed the #1 genius of the Holy Soul Academy in millions of years. Even though the three of us joined forces and used the Saint Soul secret technique, we still lost to him. Grandma Tang and Old Du are more seriously injured than me. They've already gone back to recuperate. I'm going to cultivate in seclusion for a period of time. I'm afraid I won't be able to protect Nye Tian during this period. Brother Situ, I've troubled you enough these days. Don't worry and cultivate in seclusion. I'll take care of Nye Tian. Huairu said with a faint smile. Yes. Situ Bai nodded again and looked at Nye Tian, saying, Nye Tian, you can come to the Icefire Valley to cultivate at any time. Even if I cultivate in seclusion, others won't dare to set foot in the Icefire Valley. You can cultivate in peace. Thank you, Senior Situ. Nye Tian bowed and expressed his gratitude. Yes. Situ Bai nodded with a smile and left without staying any longer. Nye Tian looked at Situ Bai's figure with a strange expression. He thought to himself, Senior Situ is already a peak pseudo-sacred expert, and yet he's so respectful of Father. It seems like Father is indeed very strong. When he came out of the ice-fire lake, Nye Fenghua was already seriously injured, so he didn't get to see Nye Fenghua's heroic posture in battle. He could only speculate that Nye Fenghua's strength should be similar to that of Kuyo Oniguchi, but compared to Eternally Merciless, she was definitely far inferior. Elder Hua, who is Senior Eternally Merciless. At this moment, Nye Tian couldn't help but frown as he thought of Eternally Merciless. Eternally Merciless is a mythical existence. I don't know much about him. Huairu shook his head and smiled. I'm afraid that no one in the entire Sacred Soul region, or even the entire myriad domains, truly understands Eternally Merciless. Nye Tian was stunned and puzzled. He didn't know why Nye Fenghua was involved in such a matter. Eternally Merciless was indeed very strange. He wasn't a saint, but his battle strength gave people the feeling that he was even more terrifying than a saint. Perhaps, his sword Dao had already broken through to the Paramount Saint realm. In the Sacred Soul region, the martial arts realm was limited by the world level, and it was impossible to break through to the Saint realm. However, the Sword Principle realm was more about the comprehension of sword intent, and it was less limited by the world. It was not impossible to break through to the Saint realm Sword Principle. Nye Tian's Sword Principle cultivation was only at the peak of sword and martial unity. It was still too weak, and he hadn't even touched the transcending God realm. Nye Tian, you're now at the peak of the God realm, right? At this moment, Huairu's eyes trembled, and he couldn't hide his joy. Yes, I just broke through. Nye Tian smiled faintly. Very good. Hua Peng nodded. He was even more excited than Nye Tian. He had never imagined that Nye Tian would advance from the peak of the Paramount God realm to the peak of the God realm in less than a month after coming to the Sacred Soul region. That kind of advancement speed was freakish. Nye Tian, you need to stabilize your cultivation for the time being. I'll assign you a mission from the Institute soon. Huairu looked at Nye Tian and smiled faintly. Yes. Nye Tian nodded. He really needed to stabilize his cultivation. Then, Nye Tian said a few words to Huairu and returned to the Icefire Valley. Huairu looked at Nye Tian and smiled faintly. Nye Tian, you can only succeed in the Institute's mission, he said inwardly. I need you to get something that has a lot to do with the power of the stars inside of you. Now that you've awakened the power of 900 billion stars, it's time for you to gain enlightenment of the true power of the stars. Nye Tian had awakened the power of 900 billion stars, but he couldn't unleash the full power of the stars. The main reason was that his comprehension of the star force was still too rough. He had yet to grasp the basic. Hua Peng would guide Nie Tian in gaining enlightenment of the power of the stars. As long as Nie Tian could gain enlightenment of the power of the stars, his battle prowess would experience another qualitative leap. Hua Iru smiled faintly and left without further ado. Meanwhile, in the Icefire Valley, Nie Tian went to the Icefire Lake. He had just broken through to the peak of the God Realm, and his martial body had been greatly strengthened. He needed to stabilize and adapt. After the breakthrough, Nie Tian hadn't experienced many changes. He had awakened 32 types of Fiend God power, but the 9 Apex War God incantation was still at the first level. If he wanted to break through to the second level, 9 Apex War God incantation, he would have to wait until he advanced to the Half-Sage realm. Lulu absorbed a large amount of Saint Spirit Flame and also absorbed the Saint Spirit Furnace. He needed a period of time to refine it. After he completely refined these powers, Nie Tian could absorb them. Lulu said that with these powers, it would be enough for Nie Tian to break through to the Half-Sage realm. Therefore, although Nie Tian had just broken through to the peak of the God realm, he was not far from breaking through to the Half-Sage realm. Nie Tian quickly entered a cultivation state in the Icefire Lake. In the blink of an eye, half a month passed. In the Icefire Valley, Nie Tian had just walked out of the Icefire Lake. At this time, the aura around him was extremely sharp. His entire person was like an unsheathed sword, revealing a sharp edge. With my current strength, I'm already not weaker than a half-sage expert. I'm afraid a weaker half-sage would be instantly killed by me. Nie Tian murmured while feeling the aura in his body. Although he had yet to reach the half-sage realm, his battle strength was stronger than a low-level half-sage, and he could even fight against a high-level half-sage. "Boss!" At that instant, a voice was heard from outside the Icefire Valley. "Zhu Shan." Nie Tian's eyes glistened as he recognized the voice to be Zhu Shan's. He walked out and saw the Zhu Shan and Zhu He brothers. The two brothers were extremely excited to see him. "Shanhe, why are you looking for me?" Nie Tian asked with a faint smile. "Boss, Elder Hua has asked us to pay a visit to the Outer Domain Hall." Zhu Shan stepped forward and said excitedly. "Sure," Nie Tian answered, a faint smile appearing at the corner of his mouth. He guessed that Hua Iru must have arranged a task for him. The trio did not waste any time. They immediately left the Icefire Valley and headed to the Outer Domain Hall. As they arrived at the Outer Domain Hall, everyone gave Nie Tian strange looks along the way. It could even be described as vicious, as if Nie Tian had killed their fathers. Nie Tian didn't pay any attention to these people, and walked straight towards the great hall of the outer court. Following this, Nie Tian and the others arrived at the square outside the Outer Domain Hall. As soon as they entered the square, another figure appeared at the same time. The figure stared at Nie Tian and was startled, before his expression darkened and he spoke in a cold tone, "Hold it right there." Nie Tian frowned and glanced at the figure, before saying in a deep voice, "What's up?" "Jing Hong." Zhu Shan and Zhu He glanced at the figure and uttered his name after a slight hesitation. The Shanhe brothers were extremely familiar with the person before them. He was one of the Outer Domain 10 Tigers, Jing Hong. Chapter 2797. Jing Hong said coldly. His eyes were arrogant and ruthless as he stared at Nie Tian, as if the latter was his most hated enemy. Jing Hong's words made Nie Tian's face darken. His eyes were filled with anger and killing intent. "Jing Hong, what are you yelling for? CK off." Zhu Shan felt that Nie Tian's expression wasn't right, so he roared and shouted. "Boss, let's not lower ourselves to a mad dog's level." Zhu He pulled Nie Tian, afraid that the latter would kill Jing Hong out of impulse. Nie Tian's face was gloomy like a block of ice, cold and murderous. But he didn't move. He was controlling himself. "Zhu Shan, Zhu He, are you two idiots? Everyone in the academy knows that this brat is the son of the traitor Nie Fenghua, yet you still call him boss. Could it be that the two of you want to be traitors as well?" Jing Hong sneered, his attitude becoming even more arrogant. Jing Hong, you better shut up. Otherwise, don't blame us for being impolite. Zhu Shan's face darkened as he roared cold. Jing Hong's mouth twitched. He sneered, Zhu Shan, Zhu He, we're in the outer courtyard's main square. Do you dare to attack me? Saint Soul Academy had a rule that students were forbidden from fighting. If there was a grudge that couldn't be resolved, it could be resolved in the life and death arena. Let's go. Zhu Shan frowned. He wanted to say something, but Nye Tian's low voice was heard. Okay, we'll ignore the mad dog. Zhu He was more flexible. He agreed and prepared to leave. Nye Tian didn't do anything, but it didn't mean he wasn't angry. He just didn't want to waste time on a mad dog. The entire academy was filled with people like Jing Hong. If he fought with every single one of them, he would die of exhaustion. Humph! Seeing that Nye Tian and the others were about to leave, Jing Hong sneered and shouted, "The son of a traitor is a coward. You'll be just like your traitor father in the future. You'll be a scum." The sound of provocation caused Nye Tian's eyes to freeze, and he stopped moving. The flames in his eyes could no longer be suppressed. He abruptly turned around and said in a cold tone, "What did you say?" Jing Hong looked at Nye Tian and suddenly felt the cold murderous intent in the latter's eyes. His eyes couldn't help but tremble. He actually felt a great threat, like a little sheep being stared at by a wolf. He was curious why a second-stage half-saint like him would feel threatened by a martial artist at the peak of the godly realm. But in the next moment, he calmed down and thought to himself, it must have been an illusion just now. Humph. Then, he sneered and said, "Kid, if I say your father is a scum, then you will be a scum in the future too." Boom. When Jing Hong finished speaking, the anger in Nye Tian's eyes could no longer be controlled. It was instantly released like a volcano that had been suppressed for a long time. His aura instantly enveloped the entire area. In an instant, Jing Hong felt a murderous intent lock onto him, making him feel helpless and hopeless. "Boss!" Zhu Shan and Zhu He also sensed that something was wrong and shouted in unison. Unfortunately, it was already too late. "You're asking for it." In the next moment, Nye Tian let out a fierce roar and pounced forward like a wild beast. At that moment, Jing Hong's eyes trembled violently. He actually felt a bone-chilling coldness. It was the aura of death. "Boss, don't kill him." Zhu Shan and Zhu He were so scared that their faces trembled, and they shouted. QL11 after all, they were in the school, and on the square of the outer court. If Nye Tian killed Jing Hong, he would definitely be breaking the school's taboo. He had previously killed Tian Zhuowen and Chen Shuaibin, but not many people knew about it. The situation now was very different. More importantly, Jing Hong's identity was not simple. He was the prince of the Holy Moon Dynasty. At that moment, Nye Tian arrived at Jing Hong's side, less than 5 meters away from him. Sword intent surged madly around him, morphed into 2 sharp blades, and shot out, leaving 2 deep cuts on Jing Hong's face. The cuts were so deep that bones could be seen. At the moment when the blades landed, Nye Tian's figure also stopped. His eyes were like sharp blades as he stared at Jing Hong as if he could pierce through his soul. Jing Hong was stunned. He suddenly screamed and then shouted crazily, "I'm not dead!" At that moment, he had already felt a fatal crisis. He thought that he was dead, but Nye Tian actually held back and did not kill him. He could not imagine how Nye Tian, who was only at the peak of the godly state, could explode with such a powerful and threatening force in an instant. In his despair, he actually forgot to defend himself. Phew! Zhu Shan's eyes trembled. Seeing that Jing Hong was still alive, he could not help but let out a sigh of relief. His heart that was hanging in his throat was finally relieved. F***CK. What's that smell? At that moment, Zhu He frowned and looked at Jing Hong with a look of disdain. Jing Hong was also stunned. Only then did he realize that his thighs were wet and hot, and there was a pungent smell of urine in the air. He was so scared that he wet his pants. "Let's go." At that moment, Nie Tian did not even look at Jing Hong and turned to leave. *T. Imbecile! Zhu Shan and Zhu He each said this and followed closely behind Nie Tian. You. Jing Hong's eyes trembled. He seemed to want to say something, but his lips trembled for a long time. In the end, he did not dare to speak. Wah! Only when Nie Tian's group of 3 had walked far away did Jing Hong suddenly touch the 2 bloody sword scars on his face and unexpectedly burst into tears. At this moment, he must be missing his mother. "Boss, you were so cool just now." Those 2 sword marks were even more satisfying than killing Jing Hong. Zhu Shan followed behind Nie Tian and laughed heartily. "Boss, that little bastard called Jing Hong. Usually, he uses his family background to look down on others. This time, he was taught a lesson." Ah! Zhu He was even happier now. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched, but his face did not show much emotion. The reason why he did not kill Jing Hong was to show others that the 2 sword marks on Jing Hong's face would tell others that this was the result of provoking him, Nie Tian. Although this method was a little cruel, at least it would give Nie Tian peace and quiet. There would be fewer idiots who would come looking for death. At that moment, the 3 of them arrived at the outer court's main hall and walked in. "Nie Tian, you're here." Just as they entered the main hall, a familiar voice rang out, carrying with it a coldness that had not changed for 1,000 years. "Ji Cho Wu." Nie Tian's gaze froze as he saw a familiar mask. It was none other than the number 1 outer sect disciple, Ji Cho Wu. "Ji Cho Wu, why are you here?" Zhu Shan saw Ji Cho Wu and couldn't help but be stunned. Chapter 2798. A disdainful voice was heard, causing the Shanha brothers to be taken aback. Then, they looked at the person who spoke. It was a young martial artist. He had sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes. He was extraordinarily handsome and his gaze was extremely sharp. However, his gaze was filled with arrogance and contempt. The Shanha brothers were obviously unhappy to be called a pair of fools. Their faces immediately turned livid. "Lu Fengming, call another one?" Zhu Shan took a step forward, glared at the other party, and shouted his name. This young martial artist was called Lu Fengming. He was considered a prominent figure in the outer sect. His strength was at the 8th rank of half-sage, second only to Ji Chuwu. He was ranked 2nd among the 10 tigers of the outer sect. He was even stronger than Chen Shuaibin, who died in the hands of Nie Tian. "Shanha, duo, idiot." Lu Fengming's face was full of arrogance as she enunciated each word clearly. She was extremely arrogant. "Good son, you're so obedient. Father asks you to call, so call." Zhu Shan smiled and crossed his arms in front of his chest. He was very proud. "Zhu Shan, you." Lu Fengming's eyes trembled. Only now did he realize that he was tricked. He couldn't help but growl in anger. "Lu Fengming, what do you want? Do you think we're afraid of you?" The Shanha brothers took a step forward at the same time. Their imposing manner was very strong, forcing Lu Fengming to take a step back. Lu Fengming was ranked 2nd among the 10 tigers of the outer sect. Zhu Shan and Zhu He were ranked 4th and 5th respectively. If it was a one-on-one fight, Zhu Shan and Zhu He would not be a match for Lu Fengming. But if the Shanha brothers joined forces, perhaps only Ji Chuwu would have a chance to fight against them in the entire outer court. Lu Fengming's eyes were extremely gloomy. He was resentful, but he didn't dare to make a move. At the next moment, his eyes suddenly turned and locked onto Nie Tian. He then sneered and said in a strange tone, "Oh, isn't this silver-haired boy the son of the traitor Nie Fenghua?" Nie Tian frowned. His pair of cold eyes glanced at Lu Fengming, but he didn't say anything. "Lu Fengming, that's enough." At this time, Lu Fengming still wanted to say something, but was interrupted by Ji Cho Wu, who said cold, "Nie Tian is my friend, you better be careful what you say." Lu Fengming was stunned for a moment, looking at Ji Chou-Wu with a puzzled look, feeling very strange in her heart. The people in the outer court all knew that Ji Chou-Wu was an iceberg-like figure, keeping everyone at a distance of 1,000 miles. Why would Ji Chou-Wu suddenly say that Nie Tian is her friend? How many days has Nie Tian been at Holy Soul Academy? How could it be related to Ji Chou-Wu? Even though she found it strange, Lu Fengming was afraid of Ji Chou-Wu and did not dare to say anything more. Ji Chou-Wu, what is our mission this time? Why are the strongest people in the outer court here? Zhu Shan ignored Lu Fengming and asked Ji Chou-Wu. I'm not sure either. Ji Chou shook her head, she had the same doubts in her heart. Just what kind of academy mission was it that required the strongest people in the outer court to gather together? Just when everyone was filled with doubts, another 2 warriors came into the hall. Among them, there was one that Nie Tian was also very familiar with. It was Ji Chen, who he had fought with before. Ji Chen was also one of the 10 tigers in the outer court. It was not strange for him to appear here. The other person was a warrior who looked very honest. After he arrived, he did not say a word and kept silent the whole time. Ji Chen. Seeing Ji Chen walk over, Nie Tian faintly smiled and greeted. Ji Chen only nodded his head, then glanced at Ji Chou-Wu, as if he wanted to say something, but did not say it. Nie Tian noticed this scene and could not help but frown. He could tell that there seemed to be an extraordinary relationship between Ji Chou-Wu and Ji Chen. Following that, everyone waited in the hall. After a moment, a figure walked over. It was actually another person that Nie Tian was familiar with, the teacher of the inner court by Ruozhu. She's not a teacher of the inner court, why is she here? Nie Tian looked at Bai Ruozhu and could not help but frown, saying in his heart, "Students, sorry to keep you waiting." Bai Ruozhu came in front of everyone, her gaze sweeping across everyone, and she faintly smiled. "Today, I called you all here to give you a heaven-class mission." Heaven-class mission. When everyone heard these words, their eyes could not help but tremble, and they cried out in surprise. The missions of the Holy Soul Academy were divided into heaven, earth, mystic, and yellow classes according to the level. The higher the level of the mission, the more points one could obtain after completing it. Generally speaking, the disciples of the outer court could only carry out yellow class missions, and at most, low-level mystic class missions. They had never heard of letting the disciples of the outer court carry out heaven-class missions. Heaven-class missions were generally very dangerous, and only the disciples of the inner court dared to accept them. As for high-level heaven-class missions, only the few people on the hidden dragon list dared to accept them. At this moment, it was really too strange for Bai Ruozhu to let a group of disciples of the outer court carry out a heaven-class mission. Yes, you did not hear wrongly. You are to carry out a heaven-class mission. Bai Ruozhu had already expected everyone's reaction. She faintly smiled and said, "Your mission this time is very special. You are to act as the bodyguards of the eldest princess of the Holy Moon Empire." Bodyguards? Everyone was stunned, and their faces were filled with astonishment. Who would have thought that the mission this time was for them to be bodyguards? In 3 days, the eldest princess of the Holy Moon Empire will be married into the Xiantian Empire. We need a few young bodyguards to accompany the eldest princess to the Xiantian Empire. Bai Ruozhu faintly smiled and continued, "Your mission is to protect the eldest princess and safely arrive at the imperial capital of the Xiantian Empire. So that's how it is." After hearing this, Lu Fengming laughed and said, "The rules of the Holy Spirit region state that the bodyguards must be very young, and cannot be older than 800 years old. Therefore, we can only let the strongest people of the outer court be the bodyguards." At this moment, the corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched, and he also understood. The bodyguards obviously had to be young cultivators. If a group of old antiques accompanied the princess, it would indeed be somewhat inappropriate. The others also understood and nodded one after another. At this moment, Bai Ruoju nodded slightly, but her expression became much more solemn. She said, "You all know that the Holy Moon Empire and the Xiantian Empire are both the four great empires of the Holy Spirit region. This marriage between the two empires is a major event of the Holy Spirit region. Therefore, although your mission this time seems easy, it is actually very important. I hope that you all treat it with caution, and don't embarrass the Holy Spirit Academy." "Of course." Lu Fengming spoke again, and then looked at Nie Tian. She said, "Teacher, I don't think we should let the son of a traitor participate in such an important academy mission." Nie Tian's gaze suddenly froze, and his expression darkened. This Lu Fengming had been targeting him at every turn, and this was not the first time. Could it be that, if he tolerated a little, she would think that he was easy to bully? Student, please watch your words. At this moment, Bai Ruoju spoke, and her beautiful eyes turned slightly cold. She said, "Whoever the Academy chooses to carry out the mission is the Academy's business, and no one else is allowed to interfere. Since you have joined this mission, your responsibility is to do your best to complete the mission, and not to care about who is carrying out the mission with you." As the cold voice fell, it was like a slap on Lu Fengming's face, causing his entire body to stiffen. His expression fluctuated between green and red, and he did not dare to say anything more. He did not think that Bai Ruoju would actually be biased towards Nie Tian. Bai Ruoju's pretty face turned slightly cold, and she did not say anything more. At this moment, several figures appeared outside the main hall, and they strode into the main hall. Chapter 2799. The Prince of the Holy Moon Kingdom. Several figures walked over from the main hall of the outer court. Everyone in the hall could not help but look over. The person in the lead was a young warrior. He was slightly plump and had delicate features. His eyes revealed a sense of determination. He wore a long golden robe that looked luxurious and bright, and his body exuded an innate nobility. Behind this person were two middle-aged men. Their faces were stern, and they did not speak or smile. Beside the noble man was another person. It was a face that Nie Tian was familiar with. It was Jing Hong, who had provoked him before. "Your Royal Highness, the second prince." Bai Ruoju looked at the noble man and hurriedly walked over and called out. This noble young man was the second prince of the Holy Moon Dynasty, Jing Rui. "Ms. Bai." Jing Rui smiled faintly, appearing very respectful. Everyone's eyes were focused on Jing Rui, and their faces were full of joy. In the Holy Soul domain, the four great dynasties were existences that could stand shoulder to shoulder with the Holy Soul Academy. And the Holy Moon Dynasty was one of the four great dynasties. This time, the second prince of the Holy Moon Dynasty had personally come to the Holy Soul Academy to select the eldest princess's bodyguard. It was enough to show how much importance the Holy Moon Dynasty placed on this marriage. "Second brother, it's this brat who injured me." At this moment, Jing Hong suddenly spoke. He stared at Nie Tian with a pair of vicious eyes and shouted hysterically. Everyone was shocked by Jing Hong's voice and looked over. Just now, everyone's attention was focused on Jing Rui, and did not look at Jing Hong at all. Only now did they see the two sword marks on Jing Hong's face. They were so obvious and glaring. Nie Tian's sword will was very strong, and he had just used the power of the divine demon. Therefore, the sword marks on Jing Hong's face would not disappear without a few months' time. "Oh no!" Zhu Shan and Zhu He looked at Jing Hong, and at the same time, their eyes trembled and they cried out in their hearts. Jing Hong was the 37th prince of the Holy Moon Dynasty. Although he was not valued in the dynasty, he was still a prince. Nie Tian leaving two sword marks on his face was like a slap to the Holy Moon Dynasty's face. Bai Ruoju glanced at Jing Hong and then at Nie Tian. She immediately understood what was going on, and her expression became extremely awkward. "Your Royal Highness, this matter." After thinking for a moment, Bai Ruoju stepped forward, ready to help Nie Tian handle this matter. But before she could finish, Jing Rue directly waved his hand and interrupted her. Jing Rue took a step forward. His eyes were as sharp as an eagle's as he ran his gaze up and down Nie Tian's body, but he didn't say a word. The scene was silent. Everyone's hearts were in their throats, and no one dared to make any sound. No one knew what Jing was thinking at Hong's words. While Jing Rue was looking at Nie Tian, the latter was also looking at him. Nie Tian's gaze tightened as he stared at Jing Rue, thinking to himself, "This person is not old, but he is very powerful. He is actually a demi-saint. His gaze is deep and complicated, and he is extremely shrewd. He is definitely not a simple person." After a long time, Jing Rue finally opened his mouth, a smile on his lips. He looked at Nie Tian and asked, "The sword mark on Jing Hong's face, was it you who left it?" "Yes." Nie Tian didn't hide anything and responded calmly without the slightest nervousness. "Can I know why?" Jing Rue frowned in surprise. He hadn't expected Nie Tian to be so calm. "You should ask him," Nie Tian replied calmly. "Second brother, this brat is the son of Saint Soul Academy's biggest traitor Nie Fenghua. I only said a bit, but he was enraged. He left a sword scar on my face. By humiliating me like this, he's provoking our Holy Moon dynasty." Jing Hong could no longer hold it in, and stepped forward with an agitated expression. "Shut up." However, Jing Rue suddenly turned around and fiercely glared at Jing Hong. Jing Hong was so frightened that he shrank back a few steps and almost fell. Everyone was also stunned. They didn't know what was going on. Logically speaking, Nie Tian leaving a sword scar on Jing Hong's face was a great humiliation. Jing Rue should be very angry and want nothing more than to kill Nie Tian, but why was Jing Rue scolding Jing Hong instead? Nie Tian was also very puzzled. He didn't know what Jing Rue was planning. "Your Lord Nie Fenghua's son?" Jing Rue suddenly laughed and asked calmly. Nie Tian's gaze froze. He was even more puzzled, but he still nodded. When Jing Rue mentioned Nie Fenghua, he used honorifics as if expressing goodwill to Nie Tian. "You're Nie Tian, right?" Jing Rue said with a smile again. Nie Tian nodded again and said, "Your Royal Highness, if you have anything to say, just say it." Nie Tian's attitude took everyone by surprise. At this moment, Jing Rue was very respectful, but Nie Tian seemed a little impatient. To others, Nie Tian's current actions seemed a little arrogant. No matter what, Jing Rue was the second prince of the Holy Moon Empire. His status was extremely noble. Moreover, it was rumored that Jing Rue was one of the few princes in the Holy Moon Empire who had the ability to compete for the throne. In other words, Jing Rue could become the Holy Moon Emperor in the future. This status was comparable to the Dean of the Holy Soul Academy. Nie Tian's cold reaction was indeed a little arrogant. However, what happened next made everyone's jaws drop. Jing Rue wasn't angry. Instead, he smiled and said, "Nie Tian, Jing Hong is young and ignorant. He doesn't know what to say and does things too rashly. As his brother, I apologize on his behalf. I hope you can be magnanimous and not lower yourself to his level." His calm voice caused the crowd to be stunned. Everyone was petrified and looked at Jing Rue with their mouths agape. They seemed to think that they had heard wrongly. The most surprised person was Jing Hong. His eyes were wide open and his expression seemed to be saying, "Second brother, am I your younger brother or is he your younger brother?" Nie Tian didn't expect Jing Rue's words. He frowned and didn't know what to say. However, he could tell that Jing Rue wasn't the kind of person who was truly tolerant. He was acting so respectfully at this moment, so he definitely had other intentions. "Nie Tian, the matter between you and Jing Hong should end here. What do you say?" Jing Rue looked at Nie Tian and said again, "Since second prince has said so, of course I have no objections." Nie Tian nodded and responded calmly. No matter whether Jing Rue's current actions were sincere or not, Nie Tian had to return the courtesy. Otherwise, it would be a little unreasonable. Thank you. Jing Rui smiled. His eyes flickered as he looked at Nie Tian and sincerely said, Brother Nie, this prince has a small request that I hope Brother Nie can agree to. When everyone heard Jing Rui's words, their expressions that had just softened a little froze again. Jing Rui actually called Nie Tian Brother Nie. This was undoubtedly admitting that in his eyes, Nie Tian was on the same level as him. What was going on? Your Highness is too polite. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly and said, If your Highness has any requests, please tell me. If Nie Tian can do it, I will not refuse. Jing Rui's current attitude forced Nie Tian to be more polite. Chapter 2800. Chapter 2795. Chapter 2, 795. Head of the bodyguard corps. As Jing Rui's voice fell, the entire hall once again fell into a deathly silence. Everyone's expressions were stiff, their eyes lifeless, completely clueless as to what was happening in front of them. Nie Tian left 2 sword marks on the face of the 37th Prince Jing Hong, humiliating him. And as Jing Hong's imperial brother, not only did Jing Rui not take revenge on Nie Tian, he even took the initiative to apologize, even calling Nie Tian brother, and even offered to let Nie Tian be the head of the bodyguard corps. Why did this scene in front of them feel like a dream? Everyone even wondered if the second prince's IQ was low enough. Nie Tian looked at Jing Rui, his eyes also filled with doubt. He really couldn't understand why Jing Rui would let him be the head of the bodyguard corps. Of all the bodyguards present besides Nie Tian, they were all half-step saints, only Nie Tian was at the peak of the god realm. If Jing Rui saw that Nie Tian could injure Jing Hong and took a fancy to his battle prowess, then it didn't make sense. After all, Ji Cho Wu and Lu Fengming were stronger, one was a 9th-step half-saint, the other an 8th-step half-saint. Their battle prowess couldn't be any weaker than a peak god realm martial artist. What did Jing Rui's current actions mean? Brother Nie, are you willing to accept this prince's proposal? Seeing that Nie Tian didn't speak, Jing Rui smiled faintly and asked again. Your Highness, Nie Tian just joined the academy not long ago. At this time, without waiting for Nie Tian to speak, Bai Ruozhu took a step forward and said, This marriage between the 2 empires is of great importance. Nie Tian really can't bear this responsibility. As she spoke, she pointed at Ji Cho Wu and said, This disciple is called Ji Cho Wu, the strongest of our Saint Soul Academy's outer court. It's more suitable for her to be the head of the bodyguard corps. After Bai Ruozhu finished speaking, Jing Rui smiled faintly and said, Teacher Bai, this time's bodyguard mission will be fully handled by this prince. This prince knows very well who will be the leader of the bodyguard. As he spoke, he looked at Ji Chuwu and laughed. This student Ji Chuwu's strength is admittedly not bad, but she can't take off the mask on her face. It's really difficult for her to be the head of the escort group. This. Bai Ruozhu's expression stiffened. After which, she turned to look at Lu Fengming and said, This disciple is Lu Fengming, an expert second only to Ji Cho Wu in the outer sect. He doesn't have a mask on his face, so he can be the group leader. Yes, Your Royal Highness, I can be the leader. Lu Fengming's eyes lit up as she stepped forward. However, Jing Rui did not even look at Lu Fengming. Instead, he calmly and firmly said, Teacher Bai, there's no need to say another word. This king has already made up his mind. The position of Guardian Squad's leader belongs to Nie Tian. Bai Ruozhu saw that Jing Rui was very determined, and there was no room for discussion. She could not help but look embarrassed. Since Your Royal Highness is so insistent, if Nie Tian continues to decline, it would seem that he doesn't know what's good for him. At this time, Nie Tian finally spoke. He calmed down and smiled faintly. Nie Tian is willing to take on the position of Guardian Squad's leader. Good. Hearing that Nie Tian had agreed, Jing Rui laughed and actually bowed slightly. Thank you, Brother Nie. Nie Tian nodded slightly and said no more. Teacher Bai, it's decided then. This king is preparing to bring Brother Nye and the others to Holy Moon Imperial City right now. Jing Rui smiled faintly and said directly. Right now? Bai Ruozhu was startled. She did not expect it to be so urgent. Yes. Jing Rui nodded. Royal sister will be heading to Xiantian Dynasty in 3 days. This king wants to bring Brother Nye and the others to meet her in advance. The royal sister he spoke of was, of course, the Royal Highness of Holy Moon Dynasty, the person who was about to marry into Xiantian Dynasty. All right, if that's the case, then you can all set off. Bai Ruozhu hesitated for a moment, but finally nodded. Then, Nye Tian and the others did not delay any further and directly followed Jing Rui to Holy Moon Imperial City. Holy Moon Dynasty was one of the 4 great dynasties of the Divine Heaven region, and it was also the dynasty closest to Holy Soul Academy. It was only half a day's journey from Holy Soul Academy to Holy Moon Imperial City. Half a day later, Nye Tian and the others arrived outside Divine Heaven City. What a magnificent imperial city! Nye Tian looked at the majestic imperial city in the distance and exclaimed in his heart. This was the first time he had seen a large city of the Divine Heaven region. Whether it was in terms of aura or size, it was much larger than the cities he had seen before. Let's go. Jing Rui smiled faintly and led Nye Tian and the others into the imperial city. Soon, they arrived at King Rui's residence where the second prince lived. Under Jing Rui's arrangement, they temporarily lived in a spacious courtyard. Jing Rui let the others rest first, then brought Nye Tian alone to the great hall of the residence. Brother Nye, have some tea. Jing Rui sat on the main seat of the great hall, smiled faintly, and gestured for Nye Tian to drink. Nye Tian, however, waved his hand and said with a plain tone, Your Highness, if there's anything you want to say, just say it. He always felt that this second prince looked very respectful, but was actually very gloomy and shrewd. He didn't know what he was thinking. Brother Nye, you are the leader of the bodyguards this time. There are some things that I need to discuss with you. Jing Rui smiled faintly, and then actually really discussed the bodyguards with Nye Tian. The two talked for a long time, including the route to the Xiantian dynasty. Who else should they bring besides the bodyguards? After discussing everything, several hours had passed. Brother Nye, tonight, I will bring you into the palace to see my royal sister, and also to welcome you. Finally, Jing Rui smiled faintly and said solemnly, I can see Her Royal Highness in advance, but there's no need for a welcome dinner. Nye Tian smiled faintly and said in a low voice, No need to be nervous, Brother Nye. It's just having a meal with my royal sister. Jing Rui laughed and said, Brother Nye, go back and rest first. I will send someone to call you when it's time to leave. All right. Nye Tian nodded and stood up to leave the great hall. On the way back to the courtyard, he had a puzzled look on his face. He really couldn't understand what this second prince was up to. He had a feeling that Jing Rui had some unspeakable secret, but the latter hid it so deeply that not even a drop of water could leak out. Don't worry about him for now. I just need to complete my mission of protecting my family. Unable to understand, Nye Tian could only shake his head with a wry smile and give up. After returning to the courtyard, Nye Tian entered his room and abruptly sensed something, causing his expression to change. He actually discovered that there was already a person sitting in the room. Ji Cho Wu, why are you in my room? Nye Tian was startled for a moment, then immediately calmed down and asked Ji Cho Wu. The person in his room was none other than Ji Cho Wu. I was waiting for you. Ji Cho Wu spoke faintly, his voice actually no longer so cold, and even somewhat gentle and sweet. HM? Nye Tian could hear that something was wrong with Ji Cho Wu's voice. He couldn't help but narrow his gaze, a strange expression on his face. If this sweet voice came from another woman's mouth, Nye Tian would feel that it was very normal. But coming from Ji Cho Wu's mouth, it was very strange. Chapter 2801. Chapter 2796. Chapter 276. What? When Nye Tian heard Ji Cho Wu's words and saw the latter's actions, his gaze involuntarily narrowed, his entire person stunned for a moment. Previously, Ji Cho Wu fainted once in the Holy Soul Valley. After waking up, her first reaction was to see if anyone touched her mask. It was very clear that under her mask there were some secret. But now, she actually took the initiative to remove the mask. Miss Ji, you really want to remove the mask? Nye Tian reacted, his brows furrowed as he asked in a deep voice. If you want to see, I can take off the mask right now. Ji Cho Wu walked over. In her pair of eyes, there was actually no longer the coldness from before, replacing it was infinite gentleness. In those beautiful eyes that were like water, there was actually a hint of pitifulness. Nye Tian looked at Ji Cho Wu's eyes. His heart could not help but tremble. There was actually a trace of inexplicable palpitation. He had never thought that Ji Cho Wu would actually have this kind of gaze. But the next moment, Nye Tian calmed down and asked solemnly, Miss Ji, just what are you trying to do? Ji Cho Wu took 2 steps forward. He was already less than a meter away from Nye Tian, his body actually emitting a faint fragrance. Nye Tian frowned, immediately feeling that there was something wrong with this fragrance. It actually caused the blood in his body to become irritable, as if even his body was a little hot. Nye Tian, the aura on this woman's body is a little strange. The next moment, Liolio's voice rang out. He immediately released a wave of power, preventing the fragrance from entering Nye Tian's body. Nye Tian instantly felt a lot more awake, his face involuntarily turning gloomy. He looked at Ji Cho Wu cold and said solemnly, Ji Cho Wu, do you know what you are doing? Of course I know. Ji Cho Wu said sweetly as he spoke. His hand moved, the mask on his face slowly moving away, slowly revealing the face under the mask. Nye Tian frowned, his gaze focusing on one side of Ji Cho Wu's face. Although it was only half a face, it could be seen that her facial features were exquisite, clear and jade-like, and the outline was almost perfect. One could not help but imagine that if her entire face was revealed, it would definitely be a devastatingly beautiful face. Enough. But at this time, Nye Tian growled, stopping Ji Cho Wu and said coldly, Ji Cho Wu, if you have nothing else, please leave. It had to be said that Ji Cho Wu's current state was indeed very alluring. Most men would probably find it hard to resist. However, Nye Tian's tenacity was not something an ordinary person could compare to. Furthermore, he felt that Ji Cho Wu's current state was very abnormal. More importantly, he and Ji Cho Wu were not very familiar with each other, and he did not have any improper thoughts towards her. Nye Tian, are you really not tempted? Do you really not want to see my complete face under the mask? Or perhaps take a look at my body? Ji Cho Wu's hand stopped as he spoke in a sweet voice, filled with charm. At this time, Nye Tian could see the gentleness and redness of Ji Cho Wu's face through the exposed half of her face. The Ji Cho Wu at this time was completely different from the Ji Cho Wu that Nye Tian usually saw. It was hard to imagine that these 2 states would actually appear on the same person. Ji Cho Wu, put on your mask. Nye Tian became cold for a moment, then said solemnly, otherwise, don't blame me for being impolite. Ji Cho Wu's beautiful eyes froze, clearly very surprised. But then, she directly put on the mask. The gentleness in her eyes instantly disappeared, directly returning to the previous coldness. Nye Tian, you are indeed an extraordinary person. Ji Cho Wu completely recovered, his voice once again became cold. Nye Tian looked at Ji Cho Wu and couldn't help but be taken aback. The latter changed so quickly that he found it hard to accept. Ji Cho Wu, what did you mean just now? Nye Tian was a little angry, cold asked. Nothing, I was just testing you. Ji Cho Wu replied coldly. Testing? Nye Tian frowned, asking cold. What do you want to test? Test whether I am a pervert or not. Could it be that in your eyes I, Nye Tian, am so unbearable? Are you angry? Ji Cho Wu didn't answer Nye Tian's words, but asked back. I treat you as a friend, yet you use this kind of senseless method to test me. Shouldn't I be angry? Nie Tianlung replied coldly. You can be angry, I was wrong in this matter, sorry. Ji Cho Wu replied indifferently, very calm, as if what just happened did not happen at all. I don't care what you want to do, but right now we are still friends. Nie Tian frowned, saying cold. If there's nothing else, please leave. Ji Cho Wu's cold eyes trembled slightly, then he said, Nie Tian, I came to find you to pass on a message from my teacher. Nie Tian was stunned, his expression became even weirder. Heavenly meteorite. Ji Cho Wu spoke again. Teacher wants you to bring this thing to him. With that, her figure flashed, and she left. Who is your teacher? Nie Tian was stunned once again, then he asked. Huairu. Ji Cho Wu said a name, then walked out of the room. When Nie Tian heard this name, he was stunned, unable to react for a long time. He never would have thought that Ji Cho Wu's teacher was actually Huairu. But according to what he knew, Huairu was a divine alchemist, while Ji Cho Wu was a pure martial artist. Was Huairu really Ji Cho Wu's teacher? Nie Tian couldn't react for a moment, standing rooted to the ground for a long time. Ji Cho Wu wouldn't lie to me, right? After a moment, Nie Tian reacted and murmured. According to Ji Cho Wu's personality, he shouldn't lie. But what happened just now was too strange, completely shattering Nie Tian's view of Ji Cho Wu. Nie Tian couldn't determine whether Ji Cho Wu's words were true or false, so he could only treat it as the truth for the time being. But what was the heavenly meteorite? Why did Huairu want such a thing? Nie Tian's mission this time was to escort the royal princess of the Holy Moon Dynasty to the Xiantian dynasty. What did this have to do with the heavenly meteorite? Nie Tian's mind was in a mess. The more he thought, the more confused he became. In the end, he couldn't think of a reason, and could only give up. Next, Nie Tian adjusted his mood and started cultivating in the room. Now he had to seize all the time he could to cultivate hard, and strive to break through to the half-saint realm as soon as possible. Several hours later, the second prince sent someone over to invite Nie Tian and the others. Nie Tian brought the other bodyguards and headed to the hall of the prince's residence. Along the way, Nie Tian secretly observed Ji Cho Wu. The latter actually didn't have the slightest abnormality, as if the previous incident didn't happen at all. After meeting up with the second prince in the hall, everyone didn't waste any time, heading straight to the imperial palace to meet the royal princess. Nie Tian and Jing Rue walked at the forefront, the others followed closely. Brother Nie. Right at this moment, Jing Rue suddenly called out to him via voice transmission. Nie Tian frowned, sweeping a glance at Jing Rue, and then calmly transmitted back, saying, Your Highness, what's the matter? Brother Nie, have you heard of the heavenly meteorite? Jing Rue pretended to be nonchalant, transmitting his voice to Nie Tian to ask. Heavenly meteorite. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed, exclaiming in his heart, his face stiffening. Chapter 2802. The tyrannical crown prince. When Nie Tian suddenly heard Jing Rue ask about the meteorite stone, his face stiffened, but he immediately recovered and replied, Your Highness, why are you suddenly asking about this? Jing Rue looked sincere on the outside, but he was actually shrewd. For him to suddenly ask about the meteorite stone, it must not be simple. It seems that Brother Nie does know about the meteorite stone. I was not wrong about you. Jing Rue did not answer Nie Tian, but laughed and said no more. He was very shrewd and sharp, perfectly capturing Nie Tian's reaction, so he guessed that Nie Tian must know about the meteorite stone. Nie Tian frowned, but seeing that Jing Rue did not say anything more, he did not ask any more. After a while, under Jing Rue's lead, everyone entered the palace. Princes could enter and leave the palace freely, but it was not easy to bring others into the palace. Jing Rue was one of the few princes who had the Holy Moon Medallion, so he could bring Nie Tian and the others directly into the palace. Then, Jing Rue quickly brought Nie Tian and the others into a hall. Brother, you're here. In the hall, a gentle and elegant voice sounded, and then a figure walked out from the inner hall. This was a young woman with a devastatingly beautiful appearance. She was graceful and noble, and her entire body exuded a noble aura. Nie Tian looked at the woman and guessed that she should be the eldest princess of the Holy Moon dynasty. Sister. When Jing Rui saw the woman, he immediately went up to greet her, extremely respectful. Nie Tian could not help but look at Jing Rui. The latter's attitude this time did not seem fake and was very sincere. It seemed that the eldest princess was very important in Jing Rui's eyes. Royal sister, let me introduce you. These are the envoys I invited from Saint Spirit Academy to protect you. Jing Rui let Nie Tian and the others come over, then pointed at Nie Tian and said, "This is Nie Tian, the head of the bodyguards I personally appointed." The eldest princess nodded slightly and looked at Nie Tian, smiling but not saying anything. Nie Tian bowed slightly to show his respect. He could tell that this eldest princess was a very intelligent woman. Her beautiful eyes contained a hidden wisdom. What surprised Nie Tian even more was that he could not sense the Princess Royal's aura at all. It was as if the latter was not a martial artist, but just an ordinary person. It seemed that the eldest princess had used a special method to restrain her aura to the extreme. Following that, Jing Rui introduced the others to the eldest princess one by one. The eldest princess only responded with a smile. "Everyone, please take a seat." The first princess lightly waved her hand and asked Nie Tian and the others to sit down. She then returned to the main seat and said with an elegant smile, "Yu Wei, please forgive me for my poor hospitality." "Princess Royal Highness, what are you talking about? We are all country people, and we are unbearably vulgar. If we have done anything wrong, please forgive us, Princess Royal Highness." Lu Fengming stood up and responded. On the surface, she said it very well. Nie Tian smiled faintly. If someone liked to say such polite words, he naturally would not stop them. He did not know how to say it anyway. Following that, everyone chatted and laughed, so the atmosphere was not too awkward. From Jing Rui's few words, Nie Tian learned many things. The eldest princess's name was Jing Yue. She was a half-sister with the second prince, Jing Rui. In the imperial family, siblings of the same mother would usually be very close. As for Jing Yue and Jing Rui, their relationship was even deeper than that of ordinary siblings. Their mother had passed away when they were young, and Jing Rui had grown up with Jing Yue. In his eyes, Jing Yue was both an older sister and a mother. Nie Tian found it strange. Such a pair of affectionate siblings could support each other in the imperial palace. Why did Jing Yue have to marry into the Xiantian dynasty? With Jing Yue gone, Jing Rui's position in the imperial palace would be much weaker. Nie Tian. At this moment, Jing Yue suddenly spoke. Her beautiful eyes were fixed on Nie Tian, a gentle and elegant smile on her face. She asked, "I heard from Jing Rui that your father is Lord Nie Fenghua?" Nie Tian frowned slightly. He did not expect Jing Yue to already know about this. It was obvious that Jing Rui had sent someone to inform Jing Yue in advance and learn about the identities of all the bodyguard. Actually, there was nothing strange about this. Jing Yue was going to the Xiantian Empire with Nie Tian and the others. Of course she had to learn about them. Nie Tian smiled faintly and nodded in response. Like father like son. Lord Nie Fenghua must be very happy to have a son like you. Jing Yue smiled faintly and said calmly, "You flatter me, Your Highness." Nie Tian nodded slightly in response. His eyes flashed as he asked, "Does Your Highness know my father?" "Of course." Jing Yue laughed. "Lord Nie Fenghua once stayed in the Holy Moon Empire for a period of time, and I was fortunate enough to receive his guidance. Although I was not able to acknowledge him as my master, he is like a teacher in my heart." "I see." Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly. He did not expect that there would be such a thing between his father and the first princess of the Holy Moon Empire. Jing Yue smiled faintly and said, "So it can be said that you and I are fated to meet." The corners of Nie Tian's mouth twitched. He nodded but did not speak. He had a feeling that this first princess was definitely not as simple as she looked. "Ah, Yue Jingrui, why didn't you inform your brother that you were having a small gathering here?" At this moment, a loud laugh rang out, and a figure walked in from outside the main hall. The newcomer was dressed in an embroidered robe and exuded an imposing aura. As he strode in, he gave off a domineering feeling. When Jing Yue and Jing Rui saw this figure, their gazes froze at the same time, and their expressions stiffened. They stood up at the same time, walked down from their seats, and said with a smile, "I didn't know your highness had arrived. Please excuse us for not going out to greet you." When Ye Tian and the others saw Jing Yue and Jing Rui stand up, they also stood up. The figure that suddenly arrived was none other than the crown prince of the Holy Moon Empire, Jing Qinxiang. Jing Qinxiang laughed and waved his hand. "Yue Jingrui, you're too polite. How many times have I told you not to call me crown prince? Just call me brother." As he spoke, Jing Qinxiang strode over and sat directly on Jing Yue's seat, snatching the main seat. Jing Yue and Jing Rui's expressions darkened slightly, but they did not dare to say anything. When Ye Tian saw this, he could not help but stare. The crown prince's status was indeed higher than that of the first princess and the second prince, but this was the first princess's territory after all. Jing Qinxiang sitting directly on the main seat seemed a little overbearing. It was obvious that the crown prince and Jing Yue's politeness was just an act, or even a trick. At this moment, Jing Qinxiang glanced at Jing Yue and Jing Rui and said with a laugh, "Yue Jingrui, don't just stand there. Sit down quickly." "Thank you, Your Highness." Jing Yue and Jing Rui forced a smile and sat down. When Ye Tian and the others saw this, they also sat down. Chapter 28:03. Sit down. Jing Qinxiang's gaze was gloomy and cold, looking at Nye Tian and the others with undisguised contempt. Nye Tian was stunned for a moment, and his brows furrowed. The others were also taken aback. Then, they looked at Nye Tian. Nye Tian was the leader of the bodyguard group. At this moment, he was the one to decide what to do next. Nye Tian gestured for everyone to stand first, and then looked at Jing Qinxiang with a deep gaze, bowing slightly. "Your Highness, can we sit down now? Country bumpkin, don't you know that when you see this prince, you have to kneel?" Jing Qinxiang shot a disdainful glance at Nye Tian, then immediately picked up a cup of tea, sipping it as she spoke in an enigmatic tone. When Nye Tian heard Jing Qinxiang's words, his gaze sank and his expression changed. In the world of martial Tao, the shackles of imperial power and imperial clans were not that heavy. In the world of martial arts, the strong reigned supreme. Whoever had the bigger fist had the most authority. If powerful cultivators like the Holy Soul Dean and the Holy Soul Three Elders came to the Holy Moon Dynasty, they would certainly not kneel to the Holy Moon Emperor. At most, they would bow to show mutual respect. If Nye Tian and the others were from the Holy Moon Dynasty, it might be possible for them to kneel to Jing Qinxiang. However, they were not people of the Holy Moon Dynasty, but of the Holy Soul Academy, so they had no reason to kneel to Jing Qinxiang. Even if the Holy Moon Emperor appeared, Nye Tian and the others would not have to kneel. Jing Qinxiang making Nye Tian and the rest kneel was simply making trouble out of nothing. "Your Highness, they're people of Saint Soul Academy, they shouldn't kneel." Jing Rui saw Nye Tian's expression change, and immediately stood up, bowing to Jing Qinxiang. "Jing Rui, sit down." Jing Qinxiang glanced at Jing Rui and said coldly. Although his tone was calm, it carried a domineering tone that could not be disobeyed. Jing Rui was stunned for a moment, his expression extremely ugly. "Your Highness, we are from the Holy Soul Academy, not the Holy Moon Dynasty. Even if you were the Emperor, we would not kneel, let alone the Crown Prince." At this moment Nye Tian spoke. His response was cold and his attitude was very firm. Finishing, He didn't care about Jing Qinxiang's expression, directly saying to the others, "Let's sit." "How dare you!" Just at this moment, Jing Qinxiang suddenly roared furiously, the teacup in her hand directly crushed into powder. Nie Tian frowned, looked cold at Jing Qinxiang, and sat down. Impudent! When Jing Qinxiang saw that Nie Tian had really sat down, she was instantly enraged. She stood up and roared, "Since you've come to the Holy Moon Empire, you must abide by the Empire's rules. When a lowly commoner sees a member of the imperial family, he must kneel." After saying that, he stared at Nie Tian and the others with a gloomy gaze, like a ferocious beast that was about to go berserk at any time. The others were stunned for a moment, standing there, not knowing what to do. At this moment, Nie Tian's expression was calm. He looked at Zhu Shan and Zhu He and said indifferently, "Zhu Shan and Zhu He, sit." "Ah, okay." Zhu Shan and Zhu He responded at the same time, then immediately sat down. Following that, Ji Qiu, Ji Chen, and the others also sat down. At this moment, only Lu Fengming and Fang Yan, who hadn't said a word, were still standing. "Bastard!" Jing Qinxiang's gaze darkened, and she directly roared. Pointing at Lu Fengming and Fang Yan, she shouted, "Who dares to sit?" Fang Yan's expression was cold. She glanced at Nie Tian, then finally sat down. Only Lu Fengming was left. She seemed to be frightened, and her voice trembled as she said, "Your Highness, I won't sit." "Lu Fengming, sit down." However, at this moment, Nie Tian suddenly looked at Lu Fengming. His eyes were extremely gloomy, and he spoke coldly. Lu Fengming could feel the coldness in Nie Tian's eyes, and her body could not help but tremble. Nie Tian's eyes were so frightening that it made people shudder. Lu Fengming's eyes were trembling, but she finally moved and slowly sat down. "Brat, you're courting death." However, at this moment, Jing Qinxiang finally could not hold it in anymore. With a roar, she directly struck out with her palm. A terrifying red light whizzed out and turned into a sharp claw in the air, grabbing at Nie Tian. In an instant, Nie Tian felt a fatal threat, and his eyes could not help but tremble. Jing Qinxiang's strength was very strong. She was already a level 3 demi-saint, and her palm strike was an all-out attack, intending to kill Nie Tian on the spot. Boom! At the moment of life and death, another red light appeared. Like an arrow released from a bow, it was even sharper and fiercer, and it blocked the fatal attack for Nie Tian. Jing Qinxiang's face suddenly darkened, and then he looked at Jing Yue and growled, "Yue, Jing Yue, what are you doing?" The person who had saved Nie Tian in that moment of crisis was none other than Jing Yue. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, and he thought to himself, "This Princess Royal is really not simple. Her aura is almost perfectly concealed, and her strength is even stronger than the Crown Prince's." Jing Yue's beautiful eyes narrowed slightly, and there was a hint of coldness in her voice as she said, "Your Highness, you seem to have forgotten that this is my place. Nie Tian and the others are my guests, and I must protect their safety." Jing Qinxiang's face darkened, and his eyes became extremely cold. "Your Highness, let's just forget about what happened just now. It won't look good if Father hears about this," Jing Rue said calmly at this moment. He was very smart to use the Holy Moon Emperor to suppress Jing Qinxiang. "Ha ha ha ha!" Jing Qinxiang was stunned for a few seconds, and then he suddenly laughed and said, "Yue Jing Rue, I was too reckless just now. Let's all sit." Saying this, he directly sat down, but his eyes were fixed on Nie Tian. Nie Tian frowned, and he said to himself, "This Crown Prince looks reckless, but he's actually very shrewd." Fortunately, the Princess Royal siblings aren't simple characters. On the surface, this big show was the Crown Prince making things difficult for Nie Tian and the others, but in fact, it was the Crown Prince and Jing Yue's secret struggle. What the imperial family didn't lack was open strife and veiled strife. Seeing Jing Qinxiang sit down, Jing Yue and Jing Rue also sat down. "Jing Rue, are these the bodyguards you brought from Holy Soul Academy?" At this time, Jing Chenxiang spoke again, with a face full of disdain and cold. Yes. Jing Rui nodded slightly, very cautious, not knowing what trick Jing Chenxiang would play next. Humph. Jing Chenxiang sneered, and his gaze swept over Nie Tian and the others. Has Holy Soul Academy declined to this point? Besides this masked one, are the others here to make up the numbers? Jing Rui's face darkened, not knowing what to say for a moment. The strength of Nie Tian and the others was indeed not very strong. Besides Ji Cho Wu, who was a ninth-step half-sage, the others were below the ninth-step half-sage. Especially this silver-haired brat, he's actually a God Realm pinnacle fighter. Don't tell me Holy Soul Academy doesn't have anyone else? They sent a piece of trash. Immediately, Jing Chenxiang pointed at Nie Tian and laughed coldly. Chapter 2804. Looks good, but useless. Nie Tian's voice was not loud, but Jing Chenxiang's expression froze when he heard it. Kid, what did you say? Jing Chenxiang's mouth twitched after being stunned for a few seconds. I'm the leader of the bodyguard. Nie Tian smiled faintly, neither servile nor overbearing. You're the leader? Jing Chenxiang laughed, then burst into laughter as if he had heard the funniest joke. How could he have imagined that Nie Tian was actually the leader of the bodyguard? Are you done laughing? Nie Tian's expression was calm. After a moment, he asked cold. Jing Chenxiang sensed the disdain in Nie Tian's eyes and finally stopped laughing. He raised his brows and said, I really don't know if the teachers of your Holy Soul Academy are fools or idiots. They actually let a peak godly realm cultivator be the leader. Isn't this just making the people of the Xiantian dynasty laugh at them? Your Highness, the fool you're talking about is me. But before he finished speaking, Jing Rui spoke up. I was the one who let Nie Tian be the leader of the bodyguard. Jing Chenxiang looked at Jing Rui and was stunned for a moment. He couldn't help but feel a little awkward. But he quickly recovered and laughed. Jing Rui, this marriage is a major event between the Holy Moon Dynasty and the Xiantian Dynasty. You let a peak godly realm cultivator be the leader of the bodyguard. Isn't this a disgrace to the Holy Moon Dynasty? Your Highness, Imperial Father left the marriage to me. How I decide is my business. Your Highness, don't worry about it, Jing Rui said with a faint smile. Jing Rui, I don't like what you're saying. Jing Chenxiang frowned. Yu Wei is your royal elder sister, and also my royal younger sister. The bodyguard concerns the dignity of the Holy Moon Dynasty. Of course I have to worry. I already guessed that you wouldn't be able to find a suitable bodyguard on this trip to Holy Soul Academy. So I've already made arrangements to find a group of powerful bodyguards for Yu Wei. After saying that, he clapped his hands. Immediately, more than 10 silhouettes appeared outside the main hall, each of them releasing their auras. Jing Rui frowned when he saw this. He did not expect that Jing Chenxiang actually had this move. Your Highness, what you're doing isn't appropriate. Jing Rui's expression darkened. There's nothing wrong with that. As an elder brother, of course I care about my younger sister. Jing Chenxiang smiled faintly, then shouted towards the dozen figures, Come in. Yes. The dozen or so figures responded in unison. Their voices were loud as they walked into the main hall. Nie Tian's gaze swept across these people, and he could not help but frown. These cultivators were all very young, under 1,000 years old. However, they were very strong. The weakest ones were 5th-order half-saints, while the strongest ones were 7th-order half-saints. There were even 2 cultivators with the strength of 9th-order half-saints. When Jing Rui saw these people, his face turned ugly. He did not expect Jing Chenxiang to be able to find so many genius cultivators. Nie Tian and the others were all top-notch geniuses in the entire Saint Soul Academy, but their overall strength was not as good as these dozen or so cultivators. Where did Jing Chenxiang find so many geniuses? Jing Rui, what do you think? These people I've found are much stronger than the people you've found. Jing Chenxiang laughed proudly. Jing Rui's face darkened, and he became even more embarrassed. He could not understand why so many monstrous geniuses had suddenly appeared in the Saint Moon Empire. However, at this moment, Fat Cat's voice rang in Nie Tian's divine sense. A bunch of embroidered pillows. Pleasant to look at but useless. Embroidered pillows? Nie Tian was stunned. He did not know what Fat Cat meant. These fellows' auras are very strong, but that's all. Fat Cat laughed and said, I'm guessing that they've taken a divine pill to temporarily increase their auras. In fact, their true strength is at least 5 levels lower than the auras they're displaying now. Nie Tian frowned. He did not expect it to be like this. In other words, these cultivators were mostly people who had just entered the half-step saint realm. They only relied on the divine pill to increase their auras, creating a false impression that they were very strong. Your Highness, are these the bodyguards you found? Nie Tian asked with a sneer, his tone extremely disdainful. What? You're not convinced? Jing Qinxiang responded with a sneer, his face full of provocation. Forgive me for being blunt, but in my opinion, these people are all clay chickens and pottery dogs. They can't withstand a single blow. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched, his eyes cold and provocative. Brat, aren't you too arrogant? Jing Qinxiang's face instantly darkened. He looked at Nie Tian with an extremely sinister gaze. He was worried that Nie Tian had seen through something. He was very clear about the strength of these people. He had found these people just to put on an act. As long as they could scare Nie Tian's group away, it would be fine. Your Highness, if you think these people are stronger than us, then why don't we have a competition? Nie Tianling's gaze became even more provocative. Competition? Jing Qinxiang was stunned, his eyes flashing with a trace of hesitation. These dozen cultivators were all good to look at but useless. As long as the strongest person on Nie Tian's side came out, they could completely crush everyone else. Therefore, if they really had a competition, these dozen people would definitely lose. With Jing Rui's intelligence, he saw Jing Qinxiang's hesitation. His gaze flickered and he said, Your Highness, don't tell me these people you've found don't dare to compete? Of course not. Jing Qinxiang immediately said, but then hesitated. He really didn't dare to compete. Your Highness, why don't we do it this way? I'm the leader of the bodyguards. I'll challenge everyone you've brought alone. Then, Nie Tianling sneered and said domineeringly, If I lose, I'll immediately leave the Holy Moon Dynasty with my subordinates. What? Jing Qinxiang was taken aback. He let out a strange cry and his eyes widened. Brat, you want to challenge these dozen people alone? Yes. Nie Tian nodded, his face full of confidence. As soon as he said that, everyone present froze. The entire hall was dead silent. No one thought that Nie Tian would suddenly say something like that. Nie, brother Nie, you. Jing Rui was the first to react. He looked at Nie Tian and stammered. Nie Tian smiled faintly and said, Your Highness, please believe me. Jing Rui's gaze trembled, speechless. While Ji Cho Wu and the rest looked at Nie Tian blankly. That expression seemed to be saying, Nie Tian, are you crazy? A peak deity realm cultivator challenging over a dozen half-saints, even a few rank 9 half-saints. What was this if not crazy? But Nie Tian's current state was very normal. Furthermore, he was very calm, giving people a feeling of having a card up his sleeve. In reality, Nie Tian was indeed very confident. With his current strength, he had no pressure facing off against rank 5 half-saint. Chapter 2805. Make you kneel, brat. You weren't joking just now, right? At this time, Jing Qinxiang reacted, his voice trembling with agitation. Although he knew that these people's strength was not as strong as they revealed, these people were definitely half-sage powerhouses. Nie Tian was only a deity-state pinnacle cultivator. How could he possibly defeat over a dozen half-sage powerhouses? In Jing Qinxiang's view, Nie Tian's current actions were completely courting death. Do I look like I'm joking? Nie Tian laughed instead, then a sharp glint flashed across his eyes. He looked directly at Jing Qinxiang and said, "Your Highness, if I win, you must also agree to my conditions." "What conditions?" Jing Qinxiang laughed, his face full of pride. He felt that he was bound to win, so he would agree to any condition that Nie Tian raised. "I want you to kneel to me." Nie Tian's mouth twitched as he said indifferently, "What?" Jing Qinxiang was originally very proud, but when he heard Nie Tian's words, his face suddenly darkened, becoming as ugly as one could imagine. He never imagined that the condition that Nie Tian raised was actually to make him kneel. Everyone else was also flabbergasted. They stared at Nie Tian in astonishment, unable to utter a word. Originally, everyone thought that Nie Tian would definitely raise a very harsh condition, such as demanding something valuable from Jing Qinxiang. But they did not expect that he actually wanted Jing Qinxiang to kneel to him. It was very obvious that Jing Qinxiang's matter of forcing Nie Tian and the rest to kneel had angered Nie Tian, so at this moment, Nie Tian wanted revenge. The matter of kneeling was completely different for different people. A spineless person could kneel down at any time. But people with backbone would rather die than kneel. Whether or not Jing Qinxiang had a backbone, Nie Tian didn't know. But Jing Qinxiang's identity determined that he could not casually kneel to others. The crown prince of the Holy Moon dynasty, the heir to the throne, could only kneel to the emperor. How could he kneel to anyone else? "Brat, say that again?" At this time, Jing Qinxiang reacted. Her eyes were gloomy and cold. "My condition is for you to kneel before me." Nie Tian was not afraid at all. He smiled faintly and said calmly, "Impudent!" Jing Qinxiang's eyes trembled, and she roared, "Brat, do you know that you are provoking the Holy Moon dynasty?" Nie Tian remained calm as he smiled and said, "Your Highness, you don't need to make a fuss. If you think my conditions are too harsh, you can reject them. But in this way, I'm still the leader of the eldest princess's bodyguards." "You!" Jing Qinxiang's gaze was incomparably cold, staring fixedly at Nie Tian, about to spit fire. He was the crown prince, someone who had been respected by everyone since he was a child. No one had ever dared to act so insolently in front of him. "Since your Highness doesn't dare to gamble, then forget it," Nie Tian said with a faint smile. He did not care at all. Jing Yue and Jing Rui's expressions did not look too good either. They did not think that Nie Tian would be so bold. To be honest, if Jing Qinxiang lost and really knelt to Nie Tian, it would indeed be a great humiliation for the Holy Moon dynasty. However, Nie Tian was clearly not targeting the Holy Moon dynasty, but Jing Qinxiang herself. "Your Royal Highness, please take your people and leave," Jing Yue said indifferently at that moment. She did not want Jing Qinxiang to agree to Nie Tian. Ending this matter now was the best outcome. However, Jing Qinxiang looked at Nie Tian with a gloomy gaze. Anger surged in his eyes, and he finally said, "Brat, I agree." This. Everyone's eyes trembled, and they gasped inwardly. Who would have thought that Jing Qinxiang would agree to Nie Tian's request? "Very well." Nie Tian smiled faintly and said, "Then let's go out now. This place is too small, we can't move around." "Okay." Jing Qinxiang growled, and then stepped out of the palace. A moment later, Nie Tian and the others came to the training field of the palace. "Nie Tian, are you confident?" Ji Chou Wu was very worried. He came to Nie Tian's side and asked in a low voice, "Trust me." Nie Tian smiled faintly, his eyes full of confidence. "Boss, be careful." Zhu Shan and Zhu, he came to Nie Tian's side and said worriedly, "Don't worry." Nie Tian nodded with a smile, his expression calm. Lu Fengming's face was gloomy, and she said fiercely in her heart, "Nie Tian, you really are an idiot. With your strength at the peak of the immortal state, how can you defeat more than 10 half-saints? Also, the conditions you proposed are even more stupid. You angered the Holy Moon Crown Prince, and you still want to leave the Holy Moon dynasty alive? Why did I have such a stupid teammate like you? Boy, go on stage." At this time, Jing Qinxiang looked at Nie Tian and said coldly. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched. His figure moved, and he directly landed on an arena. His eyes swept across everyone present and he said loudly, "Your Royal Highness, don't forget our agreement. If I win, you have to kneel to me." At this time, there were many people gathered in the training field. Nie Tian said this in public to prevent Jing Qinxiang from acting shamelessly. This crown prince's words carry enormous weight. "I don't need you to remind me." Jing Qinxiang roared and shouted, "You're going to lose." When the surrounding people heard Nie Tian and Jing Qinxiang's words, they couldn't help but be stunned, their faces full of doubt. What agreement did Nie Tian and Jing Qinxiang have for him to actually have to kneel? On the other side, Jing Yuwei looked at Nie Tian, her beautiful eyes twinkling with some worry and some anticipation. She had a feeling that Nie Tian would definitely shock her. But at this time, Jing Rui's figure was nowhere to be seen, and no one knew where he went. "Your Royal Highness, we're going." One of the warriors behind Jing Qinxiang stood up and said in a deep voice, "Kill him for this crown prince." Jing Qinxiang's eyes were gloomy and she said coldly, "Yes." The person replied, and then his figure moved, flying towards the arena. The other dozen people also moved at the same time. More than a dozen figures landed on the arena, directly surrounding Nie Tian. When the surrounding people saw this scene, they couldn't help but tremble, and then they sneered. "Am I seeing things? This God State Peak trash wants to challenge more than a dozen half-saints at the same time? This kid is an idiot. Is he sure he's not courting death? I've seen idiots, but it's the first time I've seen someone as stupid as this silver-haired brat." Everyone discussed among themselves, looking at Nie Tian as if they were looking at an idiot. "Your Royal Highness, look carefully. These dogs of yours are all good-looking but useless trash." At this time, Nie Tian's voice sounded on the arena, very arrogant. "Stinking brat, you're simply tired of living." Jing Qinxiang's fists were clenched, and she glared at Nie Tian, wishing to swallow the latter alive. The other's eyes also had a look of contempt, feeling that Nie Tian was just a jumping clown. However, in the next moment, everyone's expressions changed in unison. Chapter 28:06. A loss is a loss. What a powerful sword aura! Everyone on the martial arts practice field looked at the soaring sword aura on the arena and could not help but tremble in fear. No one had expected Nie Tian to be able to release such a terrifying sword aura. If they had not seen it with their own eyes, it would be hard to believe that a peak deity realm martial artist could release such a powerful sword aura. Lord Nie Fenghua's son is indeed not simple. Jing Yuwei looked at Nie Tian, her beautiful eyes could not help trembling as the shock in her heart was written on her pretty face. How is this possible? On the other side, Ji Cho Wu exclaimed in his heart, his eyes filled with disbelief. She had seen Nie Tian fight in the Sacred Soul Valley previously, and his aura was far from this strong. It had only been a few days. How did Nie Tian's strength improve so quickly? Nie Tian was really a monster. At this moment, Nie Tian stood on the arena like a giant sword, his aura vigorous and vast. The dozens of martial artists on the arena were even more shocked. They were the closest to Nie Tian, so they could feel the strength of Nie Tian's sword intent the most. "Let's attack together." Nie Tianling sneered, his eyes sweeping across the dozens of martial artists, his eyes full of disdain. These martial artists relied on divine pills to increase their aura, but their true strength was not strong. Even if they released a rank 9 half-sage martial artist, they would only have the strength of a rank 4 half-sage. A rank 4 half-sage was nothing in front of Nie Tian. At this moment, the dozen or so martial artists finally realized how terrifying Nie Tian was. "Attack!" In the next moment, one of the martial artists roared, and suddenly his aura surged out, his eyes filled with killing intent. Rumble, rumble, rumble. At the same time, the figures of the other warriors moved at the same time. Waves of horrifying chi were released and surged in the space, surging and surging like a raging tsunami. Only to this extent? Nie Tian let out a calm smile, his eyes filled with disdain and dominance. The 32 streams of godly demon force in his body were unleashed at the same time, perfectly merging with his sword intent, causing his aura to skyrocket. Kill! Then, one of the warriors shouted in a low voice. Suddenly, all the warriors moved at the same time and attacked. Boom, boom, boom! In midair, countless terrifying forces roared out, like raging dragons, rolling over and pressing down on Nie Tian. 9 limits of the starry sky. First limit, human death. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched coldly as he mumbled. Suddenly, a sword shadow appeared and shot into the sky. It exploded in midair and turned into endless waves of sword will that surged in all directions. Boom! Pung pung pung! The void trembled slightly, and then a series of muffled sounds rang out. One figure after another was thrown into the air and smashed heavily into the ground. This! The eyes of the crowd trembled and the shock in their hearts reached its peak. Those figures were the half-sages. In the next moment, more than a dozen figures landed on the ground, leaving bloody trails on the ground. Some of the weaker martial artists were paralyzed on the ground, unable to get up. As for the stronger ones, they were only barely able to stand up. The crowd was completely stunned by the scene in front of them. They were all petrified and turned into rows of wooden statues. The power of a peak immortal state warrior's one sword was so terrifying. The entire martial arts field fell into dead silence. At this moment, the way everyone looked at Nie Tian had completely changed, from disdain to shock and fear. Who would have thought that a peak immortal state warrior could defeat more than a dozen half-sages with one sword? Such a scene, even if they were to witness it with their own eyes, it would still be unbelievable. At this moment, the one with the ugliest expression was, of course, the Crown Prince, Jing Qinxiang. His face was like a chrysanthemum that had just bloomed and then instantly withered. It was a horrible sight to behold. He really could not understand how did Nie Tian win. Even if these people were just embroidered pillows, they were still solid semi-sage realm embroidered pillows. Nie Tian, this peak immortal state warrior, actually defeated these people in a crushing manner. It was really too terrifying. Your Highness, you lost. Just when Jing Qinxiang was at his most upset, Nie Tian's voice sounded like a sudden clap of thunder, making his entire body tremble. Lost? Jing Qinxiang was like a fool, his eyes still lifeless. Then, his eyes flashed and he cried out, "Impossible! Absolutely impossible!" But Nie Tian smiled faintly and said in a loud voice, "Your Highness, we had an agreement first. You wouldn't go back on your word, right?" Jing Qinxiang's gaze trembled again, finally completely reacting. But the next moment, the gaze he looked at Nie Tian was filled with a terrifying killing intent. "Your Highness, what do you want?" The crowd suddenly froze, feeling that something was wrong, one after another looking at Jing Qinxiang. Just now, everyone clearly heard that according to the agreement, the Crown Prince had to kneel to Nie Tian if he lost. But now, Jing Qinxiang clearly had no intention of kneeling, but wanted to kill Nie Tian. "Your Highness, you really went back on your word." Nie Tian looked at Jing Qinxiang, and could not help but frown. "Stinking brat, you're just a peasant, you want this Crown Prince to kneel to you? Dream on." At this moment Jing Qinxiang roared, and then his figure actually moved, and he even said angrily, "This Crown Prince will kill you now, let's see who can save you." As his violent voice fell, Jing Qinxiang directly slapped down in midair. Suddenly, a blood-red sharp light appeared, carrying rolling killing intent, and suddenly pressed down on Nie Tian. "Crown Prince, you've gone too far." At this moment, a cold voice sounded in the air, and then a figure appeared, landing directly on the arena, and slapped out, blocking Jing Qinxiang's attack. "Your Highness," Nie Tian's eyes slightly narrowed, and he looked at Jing Yue not far away, calling out indifferently. At this moment, only Jing Yue dared to save him. "Your Highness!" The surrounding crowd saw Jing Yue make a move, and their expressions all changed, exclaiming, "The crown prince and the eldest princess were fighting, and now there was a good show to watch." Everyone in the Holy Moon Dynasty knew that the most talented person in the younger generation of the Holy Moon Dynasty was not the crown prince, nor was it the other princes, but the eldest princess, Jing Yue. But Jing Qinxiang was the daughter of the queen, and she had the support of a great force. Moreover, she was the eldest son, so she obtained the title of crown prince. Although Jing Yue was talented, there was no force behind her, so she could only be the eldest princess. In the world of martial arts, there was no such thing as men being superior to women, but strength. Many major forces and dynasties were ruled by female martial artists. For example, the Xiantian dynasty, which was one of the four great dynasties like the Holy Moon Dynasty, was ruled by the empress, not the emperor. Many people privately discussed that if Jing Yue was willing to fight for the throne, Jing Qinxiang's position would be in danger. Therefore, everyone in the Holy Moon Dynasty knew that the crown prince and the eldest princess were not on good terms. And now, the two of them were actually fighting in front of everyone. This was definitely going to be a big show. "Jing Yue, how dare you attack me?" Jing Qinxiang's figure froze in midair, her eyes staring coldly at Jing Yue, full of murderous intent. "Crown Prince, a loss is a loss. Don't be a sore loser and lose face for the Holy Moon Dynasty," Jing Yue said coldly. The softness in her eyes was no longer there, replaced by cold, killing intent. She would never allow Jing Qinxiang to kill Nietian. If Jing Qinxiang dared to attack again, then don't blame her, Jing Yue, for being rude. Chapter 2807. The wrath of the eldest princess. Jing Qinxiang's eyes were bloodshot as he stared at Jing Yue like a wild beast. As soon as he finished speaking, the entire place fell into dead silence. Who would have thought that Jing Qinxiang would insult Jing Yue in a fit of rage? Jing Yue's mother was of humble birth, and was only a maidservant in the palace, but she was deeply favored by the emperor and gave birth to Jing Yue and Jing Rue. But not long after Jing Rue was born, his mother died inexplicably. This matter had always been a mystery in the palace. Back then, the emperor ordered that no one was allowed to mention Jing Yue's mother. But in Jing Yue and Jing Rue's hearts, their mother occupied a great deal of weight, even more than their father, the emperor. Jing Qinxiang insulted Jing Yue's mother in front of everyone, and even called her and her brother a bastard. This was tantamount to touching her reverse scale. For so many years, as the eldest princess, Jing Yue had been very careful, low-key and forbearing, and rarely fought with others. But her mother was insulted, and this was something she could not tolerate. At this moment she was angry, really angry. Boom! Jing Yue's beautiful eyes suddenly shrank and turned crimson in an instant. Then, a towering aura surged from her body, and a crimson aura lingered around her body, illuminating the entire arena in crimson. Boundary. Nietian was the closest to Jing Yue. Feeling the latter's terrifying aura, his eyes darkened, and then he exclaimed in his heart, "Nietian, get out of the way, stay away from her." At the same time, Fat Cat's voice sounded, with a trace of undisguised panic. Nietian reacted in an instant. With a step, his figure moved, and he retreated thousands of meters away. "Her Royal Highness' aura is so strong." On the arena, someone exclaimed, obviously very shocked. "It's terrifying." The others were even more horrified and exclaimed. Everyone knew that eldest Princess Jing Yue's martial arts talent was the best among the younger generation of the Holy Moon royal family, but they did not expect Jing Yue to be so terrifying. Jing Yue's aura was completely incomparable to Jing Qinxiang's. The two of them weren't on the same level. "Jing Qinxiang, you forced me to do this." At this time, Jing Yue's figure moved. Her eyes were blood-red and murderous. She roared and no longer had her previous elegance. Instead, she was very cold, like a man-eating demon. Jing Yue, what are you doing? I am your brother, how dare you be rude to me?" At this moment, Jing Qinxiang felt a huge killing intent approaching, and even felt the aura of death approaching. His eyes were filled with horror, and his voice was trembling. He was scared out of his wits. He didn't expect Jing Yue to be so terrifying. He had assumed that his ability as a demi-saint would not be too weak, even if he was not as strong as Jing Yue. Only then did he realize that he was no match for Jing Yue. You, my royal brother, are always targeting me. You even want to kill me. Do you even look like an elder brother? Jing Yue roared. She slammed her palm down from high in the air. Suddenly, countless crimson rays appeared and turned into thousands of sharp blades in the air, blasting toward Jing Qinxiang. Boom, boom, boom. Thousands of crimson rays fell like the setting sun. The momentum was so terrifying that even the sky and earth were dyed red. Is Her Royal Highness crazy? She really wants to kill His Royal Highness. Everyone watched in panic. There were many experts present, but no one dared to make a move. In this battle, one was the Crown Prince, and the other was the Royal Princess. They could be said to be the two most powerful people in the younger generation of the Holy Moon royal family. It wouldn't be good to intervene at this moment. Even if someone stopped the Royal Princess, she would still end up tragically if she took power in the future. Therefore, he might as well watch from the sidelines and pretend to be ignorant. The secret guards around the princes and princesses were not there at the moment. Those secret guards would usually only follow the princes and princesses after they left the palace. Who would have thought that the princes and princesses would also be in danger in the palace? No! Jing Qinxiang was shocked to the extreme. She screamed and did not dare to defend herself. She covered her head with both hands. The terrifying rays were like a sky full of arrows rolling over. Once they landed, Jing Qinxiang would be completely reduced to ashes. Yue, stop! At the moment of life and death, a low voice sounded, and then a majestic and boundless power appeared. It was vast and powerful, but like the spring wind and rain, it nourished everything silently. The thousands of rays in the air were instantly dispelled. Then, in the void, a majestic figure appeared, wearing a golden dragon robe. The aura around him was surging, as if he was born with the dignity of an emperor. Your Majesty! The surrounding people were stunned at first, but then they saw the figure in the air clearly. They all exclaimed and knelt down. Father, Father! Jing Qinxiang was scared out of her wits. Even her tailbone was cold. Suddenly seeing the Holy Moon Emperor appear, she cried out in surprise. Then, her figure moved and she directly flew over. Sister, are you okay? On the other side, a figure also appeared and came to Jing Yue's side. It was the second prince, Jing Rue. Jing Rue was the one who called the Holy Moon Emperor. In fact, when Ye Tian and the others came to the martial arts arena, Jing Yue had secretly ordered Jing Rue to find the Holy Moon Emperor. Jing Yue was very smart. Based on her understanding of Jing Qinxiang, if she lost, she would never kneel to Ye Tian. So she had a hunch that something big would happen next, and she had to ask the emperor to come. But she never thought that the big thing she felt was that she had almost killed Jing Qinxiang. The scene just now was too dangerous. If the emperor had not acted in time, Jing Qinxiang would have died. Jing Yue was impulsive and almost caused a disaster. If she had really killed Jing Qinxiang, it would have brought great turmoil to the entire Holy Moon royal family. Yue, what is going on? At this time, the Holy Moon Emperor stood coldly in the sky, his eyes fixed on Jing Yue as he roared. Father, you should ask the Crown Prince, and let him tell you what is going on. Jing Yue calmed down a lot and said with a slight bow. Qinxiang, what is going on? The Holy Moon Emperor's face darkened, and then he looked at Jing Qinxiang. He knew a little about the matter between the Crown Prince and the eldest princess, but he never thought that the two would fight to the point of killing each other. He was very clear that Jing Yue had a low-profile personality. Now that she was so angry that she wanted to kill Jing Qinxiang, the latter must have said something she should not have. Father, Jing Yue has gone crazy. She wants to kill me. Jing Qinxiang's eyes trembled as she shouted. Fortunately, Father came in time. If you came a moment later, I would have died in her hand. Get to the point. Why does Yue want to kill you? The Holy Moon Emperor frowned, clearly a little impatient. Jing Qinxiang was stunned for a moment, then her eyes trembled. She pointed at Nie Tian and said, "For this kid? Imperial Father, Jing Yue is forcing me to kneel to this brat." Chapter 28:08. She could afford to lose. When the Holy Moon Emperor heard Jing Qinxiang kneel to Nie Tian, his face darkened. He glared at Nie Tian with murderous intent. Jing Qinxiang was the crown prince, the heir to the throne. Unless it was a special occasion, there was no need to kneel to the emperor. Who was Nie Tian? What right did he have to make the Saint Moon Crown Prince kneel to him? Nie Tian was locked on by the Holy Moon Emperor's cold gaze, but he was not afraid at all. He only frowned slightly. Father! At this time, Jing Yue spoke. It's not that simple. Then, she told the whole story in full detail. After listening, the Holy Moon Emperor's face darkened. The agreement between Nie Tian and Jing Qinxiang could only be attributed to Nie Tian's arrogance. If there was anything wrong with him, the Holy Moon Emperor could not find fault with it. Yue, even if the Crown Prince went back on his word, you shouldn't have killed him, right? The Holy Moon Emperor's eyes darkened, and he said coldly, Father, not only did the Crown Prince go back on his word, but he also wanted to kill Nie Tian. Jing Yue's eyes flickered. The most unforgivable thing is that the Crown Prince insulted my mother and said that Jing Rue and I are lowly. When the Holy Moon Emperor heard Jing Yue's words, his face darkened. He then looked at Jing Qinxiang, who could not help but tremble in fear. Father, Jing Qinxiang was stunned, his little face pale. Just now, he was also extremely angry. Otherwise, he would not have dared to say such things. You really scolded him? The Holy Moon Emperor's expression was extremely gloomy. It was obvious that he was suppressing his anger. Jing Qinxiang stammered and finally said, I was confused, Father, please, slap. Before he could finish his sentence, a crisp slap rang out. Half of his face swelled up, and several blood-red finger marks could be seen on it. It was extremely eye-catching. Father! Jing Qinxiang suddenly looked up. He did not expect the Holy Moon Emperor to slap him in the face, and in front of so many people. He was the Crown Prince, the future Emperor. How could he behave in the future? Jing Qinxiang, you said that Yue and Jing Rue are lowly bastards. Do you think that I, the Emperor, am also lowly? The Holy Moon Emperor said in a cold voice, as if he was about to kill someone at any moment. Sun Qin doesn't dare. Jing Qinxiang paled in fright and immediately knelt down. Only then did he realize that the Holy Moon Emperor was truly enraged. Forget it this time, but don't do it again. The Holy Moon Emperor said in a cold voice, Listen up, you are not allowed to interfere with the marriage between Yue and Crown Prince Xiantian. Yes. Jing Qinxiang hurriedly nodded. Her heart that had been hanging in the air was finally at ease. Let's go. The Holy Moon Emperor said coldly. Sun will take his leave. Jing Qinxiang immediately responded, stood up, and prepared to leave. Wait! But at this moment, a figure appeared in the sky. It was Nie Tian. The Holy Moon Emperor looked at Nie Tian, his face darkening again. Jing Yue and Jing Rue were also stunned. They didn't expect that Nie Tian would dare to stand up at a time like this. Your Majesty, you seem to have forgotten that the Crown Prince and I have yet to fulfill the agreement, Nie Tian said calmly, looking straight at the Holy Moon Emperor. The Holy Moon Emperor's eyes were cold and his face was extremely gloomy. Young man, you made the Crown Prince kneel to you. This in itself is a provocation to the Holy Moon Dynasty. I didn't bother with you, but you want a foot after taking an inch. Aren't you being too arrogant? From the Holy Moon Emperor's point of view, letting Jing Qinxiang leave was already very kind, but Nie Tian still dared to mention the previous matter. He really didn't know what was good for him. Your Majesty, you may not know, but when we met with the eldest princess, His Highness the Crown Prince forced us to kneel. Nie Tian was very calm. He smiled and said, "The agreement between me and the Crown Prince is fair. Since the Crown Prince has agreed, then he has to fulfill the agreement if he loses. Unless your Majesty agrees, the Holy Moon royal family can't afford to lose." As the faint voice fell, the whole place instantly fell silent. Countless eyes locked onto Nie Tian, their faces full of disbelief. It was hard to imagine where Nie Tian got the courage to speak to the Holy Moon Emperor like this. Saying that the Holy Moon royal family can't afford to lose was a blatant provocation to the Holy Moon dynasty. "Kid, what did you say?" The Holy Moon Emperor was also stunned for a moment before he reacted. His face was extremely gloomy, and his eyes seemed to be murderous. Beside him, Jing Qinxiang's eyes were burning. She secretly said to herself, "Brat, you're too arrogant. How dare you speak to father like this? You're dead." What kind of person was the Holy Moon Emperor? He could crush Nie Tian with just a finger. Nie Tian was really looking for death by being so arrogant. "I said, the Holy Moon royal family can't afford to lose." Nie Tianling sneered. He didn't give in at all. Instead, he repeated each and every word. "You're looking for death." The Holy Moon Emperor's eyes trembled. With a low growl, he couldn't take it anymore. His aura was wild, and he was about to attack Jing Xing. However, at this moment, a voice suddenly sounded in the Holy Moon Emperor's divine sense. It was calling his name. Jing Xing was the name of the Holy Moon Emperor. At this moment, someone was secretly sending a message to the Holy Moon Emperor. "Ancestor." Jing Xing's eyes trembled when he heard this voice, and he exclaimed. The person who sent him the message was the Holy Moon Ancestor. Jing Xing never thought that the Holy Moon Ancestor would also appear. "Jing Xing, this kid is Nie Fenghua's son." The Holy Moon Ancestor's voice sounded again, this time in a deep voice. "Nie Fenghua." Hearing this name, Jing Xing's eyes narrowed and his face stiffened. "Yes." The Holy Moon Ancestor continued. "Not long ago, Nie Fenghua returned to the Holy Soul Academy and seriously injured the 3 elders of the Holy Soul Academy. Even the Holy Soul Academy's dean was injured by him. Later, he was defeated by the Holy Soul Academy's dean, but it led to another person." "Who?" Jing Xing frowned and asked in shock. "Leng Jian Wuqing." The Holy Moon Ancestor paused before saying this name. Jing Xing's eyes trembled when he heard this name, and he froze. Cold Sword Merciless. These 4 words were absolutely supreme in the entire Saint Soul realm. Leng Jian Wuqing and Nie Fenghua are together. He must have taken a fancy to Nie Fenghua's talent. The Holy Moon Ancestor's voice sounded again. "This kid is Nie Fenghua's son. We must treat him carefully." Nie Fenghua and Leng Jian Wuqing are both existences that stand at the peak. Either one of them is enough to threaten the entire Holy Moon dynasty. At this point, the Holy Moon Ancestor fell silent and did not continue. "Ancestor, do you mean that the Crown Prince should kneel to him?" Jing Xing gulped and asked in shock. "A loss is a loss. The Holy Moon Jing family can afford to lose," the Holy Moon Ancestor said in a deep voice, and then there was no more sound. Jing Xing froze on the spot like a wooden statue and could not speak for a long time. "Father, are you all right?" Jing Qinxiang saw Jing Xing's stiff face and could not help but ask. Chapter 2809. Changing Course. Kneel. A simple word made everyone's eyes tremble as they stared at the Holy Moon Emperor in shock. Everyone's expressions froze as they wondered if they had heard wrongly. Out of everyone present, the most shocked was Jing Qinxiang. He froze for a few seconds before looking at Jing Xing in shock. "Father, what did you say?" he asked in a trembling voice. "I told you to kneel to him. Do you not understand?" Jing Xing said coldly. "We, the Holy Moon royal family, can afford to lose." Jing Qinxiang's gaze trembled. His eyes widened as if he had seen a ghost. He never imagined that Jing Xing would want him to kneel to Nie Tian. Nie Tian was high up in the sky, his expression strange. Just now, he clearly sensed Jing Xing's murderous intent, but the latter's attitude completely changed after being stunned for a while. He guessed that someone must have secretly said something to Jing Xing. Then, under countless gazes, Jing Qinxiang's face became uglier than a wilted chrysanthemum. His knees trembled for a long time before he finally knelt down. "Your Majesty is able to rise and fall, this junior admires you," Nie Tian said to Jing Xing with a faint smile, not even looking at Jing Qinxiang. Jing Xing's old face was as gloomy as water, extremely ugly. It was not that he could rise and fall, but he was forced to. He had to rise and fall. "Young man, you are amazing." Jing Xing looked at Nie Tian and said in a deep voice, "You are indeed Nie Fenghua's son." Then, his figure moved and he left. Jing Qinxiang looked at Nie Tian viciously. Unwillingness, anger, fear, all kinds of emotions mixed together. But he did not dare to attack again, and finally left with his tail between his legs. The farce ended just like that. Nie Tian, Jing Yue, and the others also returned. Nie Tian and the others followed Jing Rui back to the wise prince's residence, while Jing Yue returned to her own palace. The next 3 days were very peaceful. Nie Tian and the others cultivated in the wise prince's residence. 3 days later, outside the Holy Moon Imperial City, there was a huge crowd. Today was the day that the eldest princess, Jing Yue, would leave Sacred Moon Imperial City and head for the Xiantian dynasty. The Royal Guard of Honor stood on both sides of the road. Under the focus of countless eyes, the figures of the Holy Moon Emperor and Jing Yue appeared. Nie Tian and the others had changed into the clothes that the Holy Moon royal family had prepared for them. Roar! After the complicated ceremony, a strange cry came from the sky, and then a huge shadow descended. It was the flying mount of the Holy Moon royal family, the Golden Feather Eagle. The Golden Feather Eagle's body was huge, and when it spread its wings, it was 1,000 meters long. Most importantly, its feathers were golden and dazzling. It looked extremely gorgeous, and it was very fitting for the royal family. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Jing Yue and the others stepped onto the golden-feathered eagle. Apart from Nie Tian and the others, there were also some powerful guards accompanying Jing Yue to the Xiantian dynasty. These people were basically false saint experts. They were the ones who could truly protect Jing Yue. Moreover, Nie Tian sensed that there were also several auras hidden in the void. They were obviously the secret guards of the Holy Moon royal family. Nie Tian and the others were called bodyguards, but in reality, they were not very useful. To put it bluntly, they were just decorations to prove the strength of the Holy Moon dynasty. Whoosh! Whoosh! After Jing Yue and the others stepped onto the golden-feathered eagle, the huge golden-feathered eagle flapped its wings and soared into the sky. In the blink of an eye, it rushed into the sky. Under the watchful eyes of countless people, the golden-feathered eagle's figure quickly disappeared into the sky. "I hope everything goes smoothly." The Holy Moon Emperor looked at the place where the golden-feathered eagle disappeared with a gloomy expression. This marriage between the two dynasties was, of course, very important. It would even affect the division of power in the entire Holy Soul region in the future. Of course, Jing Xing knew that some forces did not want to see the marriage between the two dynasties. Humph. Jing Yue, I wish you a smooth journey. Jing Qinxiang looked in the direction where the golden-feathered eagle disappeared. The corners of his mouth twitched, and his eyes were extremely cold. "I have prepared a big gift for you. Don't let me down." At the same time, on the huge golden-feathered eagle, Nie Tian and the others sat together. There was nothing for them to do, and they all cultivated in peace. Nothing should happen along the way. And even if something happened, there were still guards and secret guards. There was no need for Nie Tian and the others. At this time, Jing Rui's figure suddenly appeared and said to Nie Tian, "Brother Nie, my sister invites you over." Nie Tian's eyes narrowed and he stood up. He did not know why Jing Yue was looking for him. The golden-feathered eagle's body was huge, and there were several rooms on its back specially prepared for Jing Yue and Jing Rui. A moment later, Nie Tian came to Jing Yue's room. "Nie Tian, take a seat." Jing Yue saw Nie Tian arrive, smiled elegantly, and motioned for him to sit down. Nie Tian nodded and said lightly, "Your Royal Highness, what business do you have with me?" Jing Yue smiled faintly, took out a scroll of map, and unfolded it. There were several routes marked on it. "Nie Tian, take a look. These are the routes Jing Rui and I have researched. Which one do you think is better?" "Routes?" Nie Tian was stunned, and then he looked at it seriously. The route to the marriage should have been arranged long ago. At this time, Jing Yue and Jing Rui had drawn different routes. Obviously, they were worried that someone knew the route in advance and would ambush them along the way. It had to be said that this brother and sister pair were really thoughtful. It would take 4 or 5 days to travel from the Holy Moon Empire to the Xiantian Empire on the golden-feathered eagle. There could indeed be dangers along the way, so it was better to be cautious. The route was very important. Jing Yue and Jing Rui had called Nie Tian over, which showed their trust in him. At the same time, this was also a way for the two to win over Nie Tian. Your Royal Highness, I haven't been in the Holy Spirit region for long, and I really can't see the advantages and disadvantages of the route. It's better for you to decide." Nie Tian looked at it for a long time, but still couldn't make a decision. "Very well." Jing Yue didn't force him. She smiled faintly, pointed out a route, and then gave the map to Jing Rui to find a beast master to change the route. A moment later, Jing Rui returned, already giving the new route to the beast master. "Very good." Jing Yue smiled faintly, feeling much more at ease. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched. He guessed that Jing Yue was being so careful probably to guard against Crown Prince Jing Qinxiang. After all, Jing Yue was going to the Xiantian Empire to marry the Crown Prince. In the future, her status in the Xiantian Empire would definitely rise, which was very advantageous for Jing Rui. Jing Yue was no longer a threat to Jing Qinxiang in the Xiantian Empire, but Jing Rui was still there. His talent was not much weaker than Jing Yue's, and he was bound to become Jing Qinxiang's rival in the future. In order to prevent future trouble, it was best to get rid of Jing Yue on the way. Nie Tian said goodbye to Jing Yue and Jing Rui and returned to the original place. Half a day later, the golden-feathered eagle finally flew out of the Holy Moon Empire's border. Chapter 28:10. Night Falls, Roar. The golden-feathered eagle let out a shrill cry in the sky. Its huge body began to sway as if it was about to fall. "What's going on?" Nie Tian sensed that something was wrong and stood up abruptly. What a powerful ward! At the same time, he heard Fat Cat's cry in his divine sense. "Ward?" Nie Tian frowned and his expression changed. They were tens of thousands of meters high in the sky. How could a ward appear out of nowhere? Boom! Then, there was a loud roar in the air, and the surrounding air suddenly became heavy. The golden-feathered eagle's speed became slower and slower until it could no longer fly. "Boss, what's going on?" Zhu Shan looked at Nie Tian and asked in confusion. "Don't panic, everyone. Calm down." With these words, Nie Tian blurred into action and walked directly towards Jing Yue's room. "Brother Nie." At this time, Jing Rui appeared with a gloomy expression. "Jing Rui, Nie Tian." Jing Yue also walked out of the crowd, her pretty face filled with an icy coldness. "Your Royal Highness." Suddenly, the leader of the guards appeared. He was a middle-aged martial artist with the strength of a rank 5 pseudo-sage. His name was Qin Hai. Qin Hai did not know what was going on and could only ask Jing Yue for advice. "Nie Tian, this is a suppression ward. It is very powerful and can suppress any martial artist's strength below the sage to be. At this time, Fat Cat's voice sounded again. So powerful. Nie Tian frowned and his expression was extremely gloomy. He could not understand why a ward would suddenly appear in the sky. This spirit formation has a circumference of several tens of thousands of meters. Furthermore, it's filled with spirit formation power. It's clear that it was meticulously set up, said the little fat cat in a deep voice. How is that possible? Nie Tian frowned and looked puzzled. If this ward was carefully arranged, then someone must have known in advance that they would pass through here. But before that, Jing Yue had already changed the route. The new route was only known to the three of them. Pang Ren could not have known. At this time, Jing Yue seemed to have sensed something. She suddenly took out a map and looked at it. We are still following the original route. It's that beast tamer. Jing Rue's expression changed, and he immediately realized what was going on. The next moment, Jing Rue looked at the head of the golden-feathered eagle and stared coldly at the beast tamer. Your Highness, The beast tamer was obviously guilty, and his face was pale with fright, and his body was trembling. Jing Rue did give him the new route, but he did not use it. Instead, he flew according to the old route. Bastard! Jing Rue immediately realized what was going on. Howling, he charged toward the beast tamer. Your Highness, this lowly one was forced. They captured this lowly one's entire family. The beast tamer cried out in panic. He was about to be scared out of his wit. It was obvious that the person behind the beast tamer had predicted that Jing Yue would change her route, so he had taken control of the beast tamer in advance. Jing Rue, don't kill him. Jing Yue's eyes darkened. She immediately thought of something and shouted. This beast tamer was obviously being manipulated. His survival was the only proof. Jing Rue's body froze for a moment. The beast tamer's eyes lit up. He immediately looked at Jing Yue and shouted, Thank you, Princess Royal Highness, for not killing, swoosh. However, before he could finish his sentence, a sharp white light fell from the void and blasted him into a pool of blood. Then, a deep and cold voice was heard. Those who know too much don't need to live. A figure in black appeared in the sky. His eyes were extremely cold and murderous. Then, more than a dozen figures appeared in the void. Each of them had a powerful aura. Silence them. Jing Rue's eyes trembled. He then looked at the figure in black who appeared first and growled, Who are you? How dare you stop the Princess Royal of the Holy Moon Empire? Humph. The figure in black sneered and took off the black robe on his head, revealing a bony face. It was not a human face, but the face of a skeleton. Everyone's eyes trembled when they saw the face. They were obviously shocked. It was hard to imagine how a person could live in such a state. Let me introduce myself. My name is Dugukan, one of the 4 great elders of the Evernight, the figure in black said in a deep voice. His voice was eerie and suffocating. The Evernight. Jing Rue's expression changed when he heard the name. He could not help but show fear in his eyes. At the same time, Jing Yue's pretty face darkened and she cried out in horror, the largest assassin organization in the Myriad Territories. The name of the Evernight was too famous. It was the largest assassin organization in the Myriad Territories. Rumor had it that even the Myriad Territories Guild was very afraid of the Evernight. Jing Yue never expected that the person who attacked them would be from the Evernight. Little girl, you must be the Princess Royal of the Holy Moon Empire. At this time, Dugukan spoke again and said in a deep voice, I heard that you're the number 1 among the younger generation of the Jing family. You've really surprised I that you have the strength of a stage 9 demi-saint at such a young age. But it's a pity that someone paid a huge price to take your life. In order to get that thing, I had to do it myself. For the sake of setting up this spirit formation, my subordinates and I spent an entire month's time. You must be surprised. We knew that you would pass by here a month ago. Who told you to kill me? Jing Yue's beautiful eyes trembled as she asked coldly. Your Highness, you're so smart. You should be able to guess. Dugu Kan's skeletal mouth twitched. Who knows your marriage route? Who wants you dead so badly? You know better than I do. Jing Qinxiang. Jing Yue's beautiful eyes trembled as she uttered a name in a deep voice. Princess Royal Highness is indeed more intelligent than others. Dugu Kan smiled again and said, Actually, you can't blame Jing Qinxiang. Who told you to be so talented that he felt threatened? Bastard. Jing Yue growled and asked coldly, What did Jing Qinxiang promise you to make you, the great elder of the Evernight clan, take action personally? Jing Qinxiang is not a smart person, but he has a strong point, which is that he's willing to pay a huge price. The benefits he promised are definitely beyond your imagination, Your Highness. Dugu Kan smiled coldly and pulled the black robe over his head. Damn it! Jing Yue growled. She did not expect Jing Qinxiang's hatred for her to be so deep. To be able to get the great elder of the Evernight clan to take action, Jing Qinxiang must have offered unimaginable conditions. 3 dark guards of the Jing family. What are you still hiding for? Hurry up and come out. At this time, Dugu Kan spoke mockingly, appearing extremely arrogant. Chapter 28:11. You have a big heart. 3 Jing family dark guards appeared and descended to Jing Yue's side. In order to ensure Jing Yue's safe arrival at the Xiantian dynasty, the Jing clan had sent 3 dark guards, all of whom were at the 8th stage pseudo-sages. Unfortunately, the faces of the 3 secret guards were pale and there was blood at the corner of their mouths. 3 8th-rank pseudo-sanctuary. It seems that the Holy Moon dynasty attaches great importance to this marriage. Dugu Kan looked at the 3 shadow guards and smiled coldly. It's a pity that you've met Dugu Kan. You'll die here. Dugu Kan, if you dare to kill Her Royal Highness, the Holy Moon Empire and the Xiantian Empire will not let you off. At that moment, a secret guard roared and pointed at Dugu Kan, using the 2 empires to threaten me? Dugu Kan sneered and said, You're too childish. In the myriad domains, the Dark Knight does not fear any enemy. Attack. In the next moment, Dugu Kan growled and gave the order. Following this, the dozen or so black-robed figures behind him began to move. They began to form hand seals, causing the barrier in the sky to react. The dozen or so people following Dugu Kan were not martial experts. Instead, they were world spiritists. The huge barrier in front of them was set up by these dozen or so people. Even the weakest amongst them was a demi-Saint Ward Master, with a few of them being pseudo-Saint Ward Masters. Together, they spent an entire month to lay down the barrier before them. Therefore, even an 8th stage pseudo-Saint expert's strength would be suppressed below the half-Saint realm in the barrier. It was precisely because these 3 Jing family hidden guards were too powerful that they suffered from the suppression of the spirit formation. That was why they were injured and vomiting blood. In this barrier, even if you have the strength of a false sage, you can't even compare to a half-sage. Now, enjoy the slaughter of the night. Dugu Kan's voice was cold and murderous. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Just as the sound of his voice faded, the entire barrier trembled. Immediately after, white rays of light appeared in the void, covering the sky like a rain of arrows, falling down from the sky. Protect the eldest princess. Seeing this, Qin Hai, the commander of the guards, bellowed and took the lead to Jing Yue's side. Pooh! However, before he could release his aura, his body trembled and he spat out a mouthful of blood. He was a rank 5 pseudo-sage expert, so under the suppression of the barrier, he was unable to unleash his full strength. At the same time, the other guards also moved toward Jing Yue to protect her. But it was a pity that they were pseudo-saint cultivators too. They were unable to even protect themselves within the barrier, let alone others. PFFF, PFFF, PFFF. In the next instant, countless sharp lights descended from the sky, piercing through the bodies of countless guards, instantly transforming them into patches of bloody light. Both Jing Yue and Jing Rue had the ability of demi-saints, which meant that the suppression of the barrier was relatively weak. Their entire bodies were releasing their auras to resist the sharp radiance's impact while barely protecting themselves. However, the others around them were too horrible to look at. They died instantly. Bastard! Qin Hai was utterly enraged at the sight of his own brothers being slaughtered. He actually released his ability by force, and with a single move of his body, he took to the skies and attacked the barrier. However, his body had only reached the skies when it was pierced by innumerable sharp radiance, dispersing into bloody light. Hence, a rank 5 pseudo-saint died tragically. On the other side, the 3 shadow guards had gathered together, forcibly suppressing their ability and barely withstanding the sharp radiance's impact. On the other hand, Nye Tian and the others were the weakest, and were thus under the least suppression of the barrier, which made it easy for them to deal with the all-encompassing radiance. It was especially so for Nye Tian, who was only a deity pinnacle and could not feel the barrier's suppression at all. Up in the skies, Dugu-ken noticed something that left him surprised. His gaze locked onto Nye Tian's body, and he smiled coldly. That kid is quite something. To think that he could actually join the bodyguards despite only being a deity pinnacle. Interesting. PFFF, PFFF, PFFF. Within the barrier, the white radiance seemed to be endless, falling unceasingly. Hundreds of guards had all died tragically, and the golden-feathered eagle had also been forcefully shot into a meat paste, scattering in the air. At this time, only Jing Yue and her brother, the 3 shadow guards, and Nye Tian and the others were left. We can't go on like this. Nye Tian frowned and his face was gloomy. Although he had no trouble resisting the white radiance, the others could not. Because the 3 shadow guards were too strong, no matter how they tried to suppress their ability, they would still be severely injured by the barrier's power, so they were the first to be in danger. Jing Yue and Jing Rue were also close to their limits, and it was estimated that they would not be able to hold on for long. Zhu Shan and Zhu He, you two protect the eldest princess and the second prince. The rest of you protect the 3 shadow guards. At this time, Nye Tian's voice was heard, and he said in a deep voice, "Okay." The Mountain River brothers replied. Their figures moved and arrived beside Jing Yue and her brother. They released their aura and protected the 2 of them. The Mountain River brothers were originally half-sage experts, so the suppression of the barrier was not strong. Moreover, their martial bodies were very strong, so even if they were exposed to the white radiance, they would not be injured. Ji Cho Wu and the others also moved, moving closer to the 3 shadow guards and protecting them. Nye Tian, we are protecting the others. What are you doing? Lu Fengming was very dissatisfied and shouted at Nye Tian. He saw that Nye Tian was the most relaxed in the barrier, yet he did nothing and only cared about himself. Of course, he felt unbalanced in his heart. Idiot! Nye Tianling coldly glanced at him and growled, "I want to break the barrier." At this time, Nye Tian's thought was to break the barrier. The reason he was protecting the 3 shadow guards was to wait until the barrier was broken so that they could unleash their power. If the 3 shadow guards died, even if the barrier was broken, Nye Tian and the others would be directly killed by Dugu-ken and the others. Lu Fengming could not help but inhale sharply when he heard Nye Tian's words, not daring to say anything else. Lu Fengming, you son of a bitch, is my boss a selfish person? Zhu He could not bear to watch and cursed. Nye Tian no longer cared about the others, and stared coldly at Dugu-ken with a cold gaze. Yo! Dugu-ken could not help but laugh when he heard that Nye Tian wanted to break the barrier. That kid is quite interesting. He may not be powerful, but he has quite a big heart. This barrier was laid down by a dozen demi-saint barrier masters. What right do you, a god pinnacle scum, have to break it? The power of the barrier before them was beyond imagination. Without knowing about the eyes of the barrier, it would only be possible to break the barrier if 4 pseudo-saints attacked from outside at the same time. There was simply no way to break the barrier if it was from the inside. That is, unless Nye Tian could find the 13 eyes of the barrier. Still, from Dugu Khan's point of view, it was absolutely impossible. That barrier had been laid down by 13 wards masters above demi-saint, and even the most powerful pseudo-saint ward master would have to spend several months to find all the eyes of the barrier. Chapter 28:12. The eye of the barrier. Dugu Khan was absolutely certain that Nye Tian had no chance of breaking the barrier. Within the enchantment, the white light became sharper and sharper. It pierced through the air and arrived. The sharpness of the light seemed to be able to tear everything apart. Hovering in the air, Nye Tian's entire body shone with the golden pole armor of yellow skies, shattering all the white radiance that approached him before it could even touch him. The white radiance did not appear to be very powerful within the barrier, and would at most pose a threat to a low-level half-saint. On the other hand, while Nye Tian was merely a divine pinnacle, his combat ability was enough to match a 5th or 6th half-saint. That was why the barrier was simply releasing white radiance that posed no threat to him at all. Bang bang bang! Nye Tian's figure shot into the air, shattering all the white radiance around him wherever he passed. Divine sword! In the very next moment, the sword will around his body surged as he slashed out with the starry heavenly slash. A sword silhouette shot into the air like a reverse dragon, blasting towards the barrier in the void. Bang! In the very next moment, the sword silhouette descended and struck the barrier. After a dull thud, the sword silhouette actually bounced back and charged towards Nye Tian. Huh! Nye Tian's eyes narrowed at the sight, his expression changing as he promptly swung his sword again to block the sword silhouette that bounced back. His figure trembled slightly as he was sent flying hundreds of meters away from the impact before he finally stabilized himself. "Boss, are you alright?" Zhu Shan could not help but cry out nervously when he saw that Nye Tian was blasted down. "I'm fine." Nye Tian stood still in the air, staring at the barrier with a weird expression. He had merely tested the barrier with his sword just now, but the power of the barrier was much more bizarre than he had imagined. Brat, this barrier was laid down by a dozen demi-saint barrier masters over a month. You, a divine pinnacle scum, are dreaming if you think you can break it. That was when Dugu Khan's voice rang with a hint of coldness. Nye Tian's eyes were cold. Looking at the dozen black-clothed men outside the barrier, he immediately understood. It turned out that these dozen or so people were all powerful spirit formation masters. After hearing Dugu Khan's words, he finally realized how powerful the barrier was. No wonder even an 8th-grade pseudo-sacred realm expert was suppressed by it. It seemed that Dugu Khan had made a meticulous plan to kill Jing Yue. Brat, if you don't believe in the power of this spirit formation, you can strike a few more times. Let me see exactly how strong your sword intent is. Dugu Khan smiled cold and spoke with a deep voice. Nye Tian furrowed his brows, feeling strange. Dugu Khan seemed to be trying to bait him into making a move. "Alright, since you want to see it, I'll show you." With a cold smile, Nye Tian's lips curled into a cold smile, and he moved again. Boom! The starlight heaven slash in his hand fiercely pierced out. The sword intent was incomparably vigorous, unceasingly condensing in the air. A several thousand-meter-long sword image appeared, majestically and mightily, bombarding the barrier. Boom! The sword image arrived and landed on the barrier, causing a violent explosion in the air. Instantly, the entire spirit formation master began to tremble. At that moment, the dozen or so spirit formation masters outside the spirit formation master revealed sinister smiles at the same time, and the hand seals in their hands changed. Boom! The next moment, the enormous spirit formation rumbled, and the frightening sword image was reflected back. Furthermore, the sharp white light in the air rapidly fused with the sword image, causing the sword image's might to instantly increase by several times. Seeing this, Nye Tian's eyes narrowed. He clearly did not expect the spirit formation master to be so strange that it could explode with such power. However, he was extremely calm. In the next moment, astral energy surged out from his body, and the astral soul shield was activated. Boom! The sword image was like a mountain, and it suddenly fell, directly bombarding Nye Tian's body. His body did not move, and he forcefully endured the impact of the sword image. He had to use his body to block the attack, or else Jing Yue and the others below would be in danger. Bang! In midair, a dull sound rang out. The moment the sword shadow shattered, Nye Tian's figure was sent flying. Luckily, his martial physique was extremely tyrannical. In midair, he activated his astral soul wings, forcefully stabilizing his body. But even so, he was still injured. Blood seeped out from the corner of his mouth. Humph! Seeing that Nye Tian was injured, Duguken couldn't help but sneer. He said in a deep voice, "Brat, you really are stupid. With your strength, you want to forcefully break the spirit formation? Aren't you just courting death? Nye Tian, what are you doing? Are you an idiot?" Below, Lu Fengming shouted loudly. She was extremely furious. "Shut up!" Nye Tian suddenly turned around and gave Lu Fengming a cold look. "Nye Tian, don't be anxious. Calm down. Let's drag it out with this guy first." At that moment, the fat cat's voice rang out. Nye Tian frowned, a strange expression on his face. At this moment, they were in the spirit formation, enduring the attacks of the white light. Of course, Nye Tian was fine, but the others wouldn't be able to hold on for long. This spirit formation is very strange. It's very complicated. There's more than one eye of the spirit formation. Our only chance now is to find all the eyes of the spirit formation and destroy them. If that's the case, the spirit formation will collapse by itself. The fat cat said in a deep voice. "I haven't seen the distribution of the spirit formation clearly. You have to calm down first. Don't be impulsive. Just maintain your strength." And Nye Tian nodded his head heavily. Next, he was much calmer. His silhouette stood tall in the air, relying on the golden sky battle armor to block the attacks of the white light. "Ju Shan, Ju He, protect the Grand Princess. You must hold on," Nye Tian said in a deep voice. "Okay." The mountain and river brothers nodded their heads heavily. Within the spirit formation, they didn't feel much pressure. It was very easy for them to protect Jing Yue. As for the others, they could temporarily protect Jing Rue and the 3 shadow guards. Seeing that Nye Tian became cold, Duguken couldn't help but feel curious. With Nye Tian's strength, as long as he stayed within the spirit formation, there was really nothing they could do. "Kid, you've become smarter." But immediately after, Duguken sneered and said, "Since you want to hold on, I'll accompany you. I want to see how long you can hold on. And even if you can, your friends won't be able to." Nye Tianling sneered. His silhouette flickered and he descended. His body emitted astral energy, forming a shield of astral souls that enveloped everyone. This way, the pressure on the others was much less. Moreover, Nye Tian's body was filled with astral energy. To him, maintaining the shield of astral souls wasn't a difficult task. "How is it? My friends can hold on now, right?" Nye Tianling sneered and said in a provocative tone. "You!" Duguken growled in a low voice. He was obviously angry. Then, he roared and shouted to the world spiritists behind him. "Change your moves. Let this kid know the power of the spirit formation." The world spiritists answered and changed their hand seals. Chapter 2813. Chapter 2808. Chapter 2, 808 Lingering on Death's Door. Boom boom boom. In the sky, a terrifying blood-red tide fell from the sky like a blood-red beast. The surrounding space was dyed dark red. The scarlet oppressive aura made people feel suffocated. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed. He didn't expect this boundary to be so strange. It could change its attack in an instant. "Nye Tian, think of something. Lu Fengming felt that the blood waves were much more terrifying than the white rays. Her face paled and she shouted, "Shut up!" Nie Tianling turned around and growled, "Lu Fengming, if you say another word, I will kill you." He was already annoyed enough and Lu Fengming was still babbling. How could he not be angry? Lu Fengming saw that Nie Tian was angry and felt the coldness in his eyes. Her face froze and she didn't dare to make another sound. "You bastard, let's see how you deal with this." Dugu Kan sneered. 8 Baron's sword. Nie Tian's expression darkened as he moved. He slashed out with the starlight heaven slash. Instantly, boundless sword intent surged out, rolling like a raging tsunami. Kaboom! Hiss! 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 The sword will was ferocious and it blocked the blood wave. Piercing noises sounded in the air. "Humph! You bastard, you fell for it!" Seeing this, Dugu Kan snickered and was extremely pleased. Nie Tian had blocked the blood-red tide, but he was now in a stalemate with the endless tide. At this moment, he had to rely on ceaselessly consuming his sword insight in order to be able to block the blood-red frenzy. In other words, in this stalemate, both sides had to consume their energy. But Nie Tian's energy was limited while the boundary's energy was limitless. More importantly, this huge barrier could constantly absorb energy from the void. Therefore, when Nie Tian's sword will ran out, he would be done for. Oh no! Nie Tian frowned and immediately reacted. His expression became extremely ugly. The current situation was extremely disadvantageous to him. However, he had no other choice but to remain in a stalemate. Nie Tian. Jing Yue's pretty face tensed up when she saw the scene in midair. Her expression was extremely ugly. The expressions of the others were also extremely ugly. Everyone could only pray in their hearts that Nie Tian could hold on for a little longer. But even if Nie Tian continued to persevere, what was the point? Apart from Nie Tian, everyone inside the barrier was basically in a state of no fighting capacity. Furthermore, it was impossible for anyone to come to their rescue in such a place. Therefore, even if Nie Tian continued to persist, he would only be waiting for death. What should I do? Nie Tian's heart sank as his brain worked rapidly. In his current state, he wouldn't be able to hold on for long before the sword intent in his body was completely exhausted. At that time, he would really be in danger. Ha ha! Brat, I really want to see how long you can hold on for. I really can't wait to see the scene of you being devoured by the frenzy tide. Dugu Kan sneered as his black robe trembled slightly. He had originally thought that this mission would be very easy. However, he didn't expect an anomaly like Nie Tian to appear. If it weren't for Nie Tian, he would have already completed his mission. However, there was nothing much to it now. At most, he would just play a little longer. Dugu Kan had to admit that Nie Tian was a genius. Even with his experience, Nie Tian's talent was enough to rank in the top 5 among everyone he had met. It was just a pity that Nie Tian had encountered him, Dugu Kan. Being able to kill a growing genius gave Dugu Kan a perverted sense of satisfaction. At that moment, Fat Cat's voice rang out, Nie Tian, hold on for a little longer. Ghost Emperor and I will be able to find the boundary eye soon. He was working together with Ghost Emperor to find the boundary eye. The boundary eye was indeed very complicated and intricate. Even monstrous figures like Fat Cat and Ghost Emperor would not be able to find the boundary eye in a short period of time. Alright. Nie Tian roared in his heart, his eyes filled with determination. At that moment, he had no other choice but to hold on. As time passed, Nie Tian gradually felt that the sword intent in his body couldn't hold on for much longer. Large beads of sweat appeared on his forehead, and blood flowed continuously from the corner of his mouth. The blood-colored frenzy tide in the air became more and more intense, and its aura became stronger and stronger. Nie Tian felt an incomparable pressure on his chest, as if he was about to suffocate. And within his body, blood-colored runes were constantly surging. Outside his martial body, tiny bloody holes began to appear. They slowly expanded, tearing apart his body bit by bit. Ah, stinking brat, you can't hold on any longer. Do you still want to hold on? Dogu-kan let out a hysterical laughter in the air when he saw this scene. At this rate, it wouldn't be long before Nye Tian would be torn to pieces by the blood-colored frenzy tide. Nye Tian. Jing Yue saw that Nye Tian's entire body had become a bloody mess. Her beautiful eyes couldn't help but tremble as she shouted. Her eyes welled up with moisture, which eventually turned into tears and flowed out. This was the first time she shed tears for a man. She was somewhat puzzled as to why Nye Tian was still holding on at this time. Boss. The Zhu Shan and Zhu He brothers also had sorrowful expressions as they shouted in unison. Ji Cho Wu's cold eyes trembled. He wanted to say something, but didn't shout. I'm fine, Nye Tian said in a low voice. Zhu Shan and Zhu He, just protect Her Highness Princess Royal. Leave this boundary eye to me. Stinking brat, death is at hand and you still want to be a hero? Dogu-kan laughed coldly and shouted, I think you can only hold on for one more minute. The frenzy tide is about to swallow you up. Is that so? Nye Tian let out a low roar. His eyes suddenly looked at Dogu-kan, his gaze cold and firm. Dogu-kan suddenly saw the look in Nye Tian's eyes. He couldn't help but frown and his body also trembled. He had never seen a person's eyes that could be so firm. Especially in this almost hopeless situation, the look in Nye Tian's eyes was even more terrifying, making him tremble. Kid, it's useless to be stubborn. You're dead. Ha ha. But the next moment, Dogu-kan let out a low roar and laughed wildly. But then, his laughter suddenly stopped. His skeletal face under the cover of the black robe suddenly became stiff. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Nye Tian's body shook. 9 formation chains were suddenly released from his body. Like 9 giant snakes, they actually directly restrained the blood-colored frenzy tide. Bone-eroding soul shackling chains, this is my final trump card. Fatty, Ghost Emperor, you must find the eye of the boundary eye. Nye Tian's gaze was cold as he said in his heart. His sword intent was almost exhausted. With the 9 bone-eroding soul shackling chains, he could still resist for a while. But this was only temporary. He couldn't hold on for long. Kid, you really have some skills. Looks like I've underestimated you. Dogu-kan recovered from his shock and said coldly, but this can't change anything. At most, it will let you linger on for a while.